across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or watching on YouTube or any of the other ways of watching and listening, thank you very much indeed for your company. Are you like me, someone who's actually managed to get like a vaguely proper night's sleep in the last night because it's finally cooled out a bit? I know it's going to be hot again today, but it's got a bit cooler at night. We're not sort of in 30 degrees at night, so it's bearable. If, like me, you are just sort of finally got some energy back, welcome to the show. If you're still suffering, soz about that, but we will push on through. Lots to talk about. If you miss anything from the show, and I really wouldn't if I were you, go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe, and you'll never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be discussing Reform UK, saying that if they win power, foreign nationals would be banned from claiming most benefits. That's 1 million people from abroad. That would include EU citizens, the ones who've been given the right to stay under that reciprocal deal as part of the Brexit deal. That would involve something of a renegotiation, would it not, of the Brexit deal? But they want to stop them from claiming benefits. They also announced yesterday that they would cut 50 billion from the welfare bill by abolishing PIP, those personal independence plans, in-person reviews for everybody. It would take a while. I mean, I think they're about 3 or 4 years behind on those at the moment. But that's because, everyone works from home and does, 2 bits of paper movements a day. But basically it said that more than half of people who were claiming would lose their benefits. The idea is that the people who actually need the benefits will get the help they actually need, and a load of people who won't. And some talk today on the radio from a senior reform figure, which is actually be able to give more help, which is what we really should be doing, to the people who really need it to live a decent and happy life, rather than giving it to people who are claiming to be, well, it's 4 minutes past 10, I've got a bit of anxiety, I can't go to work today. So we'll be talking about that. There is a speech from Robert Jenrick, who he's going to be talking about this. He's, of course, their Treasury spokesman, not the Shadow Chancellor. He's the Treasury spokesman for Reform. He's going to be giving a speech live at 11. And we know that in that speech there are going to be some other announcements which are also most definitely going to be interested in, but we're not allowed to talk about those until they're under embargo, until he does speak. So we will be talking about that. It's nice and interesting with a new survey today, and again, this classic survey from a think tank. Half of disability benefit claimants would be prepared to sacrifice £1,000 a year of their benefits in exchange for services such as therapy and healthy meals. It's almost like they could use that money they get to pay for those things, couldn't they? I'm just throwing that out there. Plus, we're going to be talking about the Jason Arday affair. He was found dead on Friday, sadly, very, very sadly for his family, his wife and children. But the onslaught, the debate, the extraordinary claims around his life and now his death have not abated. Indeed, some would say they've got even worse in terms of the claims. We have not only the head of the Cambridge College calling for an investigation into what they call the media onslaught, a petition started by the Good Law Project calling for a public inquiry into, basically the racist hounding of the, Cambridge University's youngest black professor, as he was before he resigned a week before his death. We've got a crowdfunder now topping £145,000 for his funeral. Now it's turned into a funeral and memorial. We've got a vigil in Trafalgar Square tonight for this man. We're going to be talking to a guest a little bit later who's contributed to that crowdfunder. We will be talking to him. I'm fascinated to get your thoughts on all of this as well. I'm also going to be talking about that new sentencing law allowing people, well, not just the early release of people, but also remember that rule that came in that basically if you were sentenced to under a year, you don't actually serve any time behind bars, because what is the point of then sentencing someone to a year in prison? But that includes paedophiles and domestic abusers who are being spared jail because of that rule. Extraordinary. We'll talk about all of that. Way more besides, including will Andy Burnham call an early general election, that absurd emergency mobile alert that terrified the living daylights out of us all on Friday night. And I'm delighted to say joining us for all the chat today is Claire Pissell, former Conservative Government Advisor. Morning!
Morning.
Always good to see you on a Monday. Thank you very much. My question to the audience today, because I know that although online there is only one story at the moment, and it is involving Jason Arday, I think for 3 or 4 days solid now. But I know that once we hear more of the details, we are going to hear from Robert Jenrick today. We are going to definitely want to be focusing more on that. Reform UK would ban 1 million foreigners, including EU citizens, living in Britain from claiming almost all benefits. They reckon it will save £21 billion a year. What is your reaction to that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. All together now on a Monday morning. Text costs one standard network message. Thank you. They never join in the studio. They never join in. It's just you and me doing that. Claire Pearsall, let's talk about Robert Jenrick. It's interesting they're dribbling this out over a few days, getting 3 days' worth of headlines. So the Sunday papers, we had Robert Jenrick vowing to cut £50 billion from the welfare bill, much to be welcomed. Abolishing PIP, personal independence plans. So he said there'll be in-person reviews. Basically, they're expecting more than half of people to lose their benefits, which is a serious amount of money, isn't it, being saved. Then we have the announcement today that came in the papers that Reform UK would ban foreigners from claiming benefits. So it's more than 1 million people here, including EU citizens with settled status, would require a renegotiation of the Brexit deal, likely to trigger a reciprocal move levied on British expats, although most of those, I believe, are not claiming benefits. They're retirees, their own funds, and there's a far smaller number, although they don't actually know for sure what the numbers are in the way we actually kept a list of people who had applied for that settled status. But we're talking about, a heck of a lot of people. Basically, I mean, we are looking like, foreigners being banned from claiming universal credit, housing benefit, huge sums, billions, tens of billions, pension credit, job seekers allowance, child benefit, free childcare and disability benefits. Huge, I mean, it's a huge sum. Got to be honest with you, what's not to like?
No, and strangely, the Conservatives have also put plans forward previously about looking at the amount of people claiming and fraudulent claims. And quite interestingly, the amount of fraud in personal independence payments is really, really tiny. I would go after universal credit, housing benefit.
The official numbers on fraudulent claims are based on something being utterly proven as someone is like, these are the people you see in the tabloids where I've been claiming disability benefits because I've not been able to move since my car accident 5 years ago, and here I am zip-lining in Costa Rica, right? Yeah. Having done an assault course and a bit of parasailing as well. No, I'm sorry. That's what they call fraud. I've got a very good mate who works in benefits dealing with fraud. That doesn't include all the people who this morning are saying, I can't find a job. I've got a bit of anxiety, got a bit of depression. That is fraud. We just don't call it fraud, and it would never be called fraud in the system. They don't have a right to benefits. They shouldn't be given benefits. They should be out working. Those people also. When people say there's a tiny amount of fraud, no, that's not true.
Putting that to one side, putting that to one side, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at who is claiming and why they're claiming, because there are an awful lot of people who could be fit to work and should be working, so we need to have a look at that. Absolutely, and the bill is unsustainable. Going forward, it's going to cost us so much more in the future. We need to have a look at why these people are claiming. I think what's interesting is the inclusion of putting in support for those people who need it. Absolutely, that's exactly what it should be there for, because some people are on the sick at the moment who could be back to work with a few adjustments, with some therapy, with whatever it is.
I mean, this is what they should have been given in the first place.
Absolutely.
Basically, if you have a problem, you have a knee injury, as I've had. I can go to work with a knee injury, but not if I'm a builder. So a builder gets signed off. Yeah. They're not looked at again for 3 years. No one comes and checks. They're not offered any therapy. They're waiting 10 months, 2 years, or whatever, on the NHS to wait for some physio and things. Yeah. It's an insane waste of money. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about whether foreigners should be entitled to claiming benefits.
Well, no. And I think that is really basic as to why anybody that doesn't have a stake in this country should be entitled to state money.
What about someone who's worked here for years, paid national insurance, paid tax, a high earner, so someone who's a net contributor, not someone on minimum wage who, with all due respect, you can work hard and do a very, very important job. You will not have even covered your public service. The public services use the cost of that in your working years. and you have an accident, you can't work anymore. Should they be entitled to benefits?
And this is where it becomes tricky, because if you have paid into the system, if you are, for example, I know of a GP who had been here 25 years working in the NHS, paying an awful lot of tax, paid into the system, suddenly was diagnosed with a life-limiting illness and would need to claim benefits. Is that the kind of person...
Would they even be entitled? Because actually, if you've been a GP, and my mum was a GP, you know, they were on some pretty good contracts. You would have life insurance, you would have insurance for disability.
Even so,
they're technically self-employed. But they would have enough money to provide for themselves.
But is that the kind of person that you would want to stop using the system, who has paid in, who has been a part of their society, who has given back to the community?
But interestingly, chosen, for instance, not to become a British citizen all that time.
Some of them may not. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people don't feel the need to, they don't want to, it's an expensive
But that would be a choice. I would liken it to, for instance, couples who get married being entitled to, you know, claims on each other and to, you know, financial aid, but not couples who cohabit. And I know that Labour want to change the law. No, if someone has chosen
it's your choice.
It should be a choice. They shouldn't just get it by default.
No, exactly. But I think this is where we need to see what the level of detail is on this, because I think most people would understand if you've only just arrived in the country, you shouldn't be entitled to state handouts.
And yet they are.
And that needs to be seriously looked at, and the British public will be wondering where their money has gone. But I do worry that you start looking at settled status, what kind of repercussions that have. You know, we don't like the conversation with Europe at the best of times, but I think that any kind of hope of working trade-wise with them is going to be exceptionally difficult.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Matt Goodwin, who is, was a Reform candidate in Gorton, Denton, remember, but he knows his stuff, and he's been writing about these issues for years. And he points out, 4 key facts today in his Substack, which I cannot recommend enough. Long before I knew he was Reform, by the way, I'd recommend it. But more than 1.3 million foreign nationals claim universal credit welfare payments. Okay, so the idea is, of course, that universal credit is not an out-work benefit. It's in work as well. In fact, the majority of people on it are out of work, and more than half of people who go on it, who are in work, then give up their jobs, which tells you everything. 1 in 6 people on universal credit are foreign nationals. More than 1 in 10 new social housing lets in England last year went to people who are not British citizens. Often they will be married to or with somebody who is British citizen. But, and in the last 5 years, the number of young British people who were added to UK payrolls increased by only 11,000. The number of young foreign nationals from crucially outside Europe who were added rocketed by nearly 300,000. We have 1 million young Brits who are not in work, education or employment, and yet we are bringing people in and offering. We've got, a vape shop in the East End of London, has got, had brought in 45 skilled workers in the last 2 years, under these visas. The whole thing is a scam. We don't need to import a load of people to do a load of low-skilled work.
No, we don't.
We have people to do that.
The thing is, we never have, and it's always been the argument that the NHS would fall down at its knees if we didn't, which I don't buy. There was a certain amount needed. But to be honest, what are we doing to businesses to encourage them to take on people anyway?
We only need to bring people in abroad from the NHS because we refuse to train enough people of our own.
And that's
there
my
are
point.
Thousands of young people who this summer will have got grade A's or grade A stars in their science subject to go to study medicine, but there's a limited number of places and they're not able to study medicine because they're only going to pay £9,500 or whatever it is this year, but foreign students pay over 30 grand, and so the universities would rather train them. I mean, that's the reality.
And why are we writing off our own people just because there could be a kid out there who has got B's in sciences and they won't go to study medicine, for example, but they could go into an ancillary profession. They could go into physiotherapy. They could go into being a paramedic. We are looking at the alternative places for people like that so that we don't then have to import those staff to do it. So why aren't we encouraging that, and why aren't we encouraging businesses to take more people on?
And quite apart from the immorality of importing highly trained healthcare workers from other countries, there are many, many countries where they are absolutely struggling to get healthcare themselves because so many of their medics move abroad. I would say it's deeply immoral for us. We should be paying to train those people ourselves. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Bearing in mind, Robert Jennett will be speaking at 11. We'll try and take some of his speech live, but there's going to be a further announcements where I think you'll also find very interesting. Not allowed to talk about it, it's under embargo until he speaks. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Let's talk briefly about that mobile alert on Friday. Friday night because there were people who they were driving, people swerving all over the motorways. People, absolutely I mean, there were 4 of us, we were having dinner, absolutely terrified the living daylights out of all of us. We all just were like, what the hell just happened? And an alert basically telling me in my North London back garden, can you not light a wildfire or have a barbecue? Absurd. Huge number of calls to emergency services from people going, my neighbour's having a barbecue. I mean, those people are insane. But absurd. And also, this is an emergency mobile system to be used in only emergencies, and we've actually had what a surprise! We've actually had the government, the organisation that actually organises this. They've actually said that that this is that they should not use that emergency mobile alert. The official report warned in advance. Absolutely. Apparently it was Louise Haigh, the first Secretary of State, who ordered it. Interestingly, she's always had a few issues with mobile phones.
Yes. I'm surprised it was just one of hers that went off. We were in Waitrose, middle class alert here, and you can imagine the amount of confused...
Buying quinoa.
I really wasn't.
Buying pappardelle.
Buying pizza, but there you go. So my husband didn't hear it. So I know he's listening at the moment. He didn't hear it, but there were an awful lot of people sort of looking very carefully around. We didn't know if the store was going into lockdown. I want that alert to be if the Russians are walking down the street or they're going to start bombing. That's what it should be for.
Yep.
Not just to say, don't be an idiot and light a fire in your garden.
Yeah, and by the way, those idiots are still going to go and do it.
Well, of course they are.
There we are. Exactly. It's quite absurd. I mean, and again, really, and it was Andy Burnham he'd signed off on it, and his first Secretary of State. Sorry, yet another wrong-footed move there. Let's also talk about Jason Arday. The last time we were talking about him was on my show on Thursday. He had resigned as a Cambridge professor. He'd been appointed just a few years ago as the youngest black professor at Cambridge, much hailed, guest editor of the Today programme. He had a book that had just come out in America reputedly it's on 1.4. We don't know if it was $1 million or £1 million. That may have been a lie as well. We don't know, but definitely know it was a huge advance from Simon & Schuster for his book. We know that, I mean, let's be honest, virtually everything he's ever said about his life, at the very least, cannot be backed up by the truth. On Friday night, we learnt that he had taken his own life. Now, he has a wife, he had children, he has family members. One would always feel nothing but sympathy and empathy for those people. Do I think that they spent the weekend online looking at what other people like me were saying? I doubt it. I don't think that would be a wise thing or a good thing for anyone to spend their time doing. I was absolutely stunned and amazed how over the next best part of 24 hours, in fact, it's gone on for the last 3 days, people who were fooled by Jason Arday doubled down. People who had believed that, yes, he really was this amazing wunderkind and had been mute to the age of 11 and illiterate to the age of 18, that he had run 30 marathons in 35 days and run 600 miles in 6 days on a treadmill, that he had raised £5 million for charity, who'd reported this stuff, journalists who had interviewed him, professors who had worked with him, friends, people who'd signed, thousands of people who had signed that letter from the great and the good, accusing those who had raised concerns about plagiarism, accusations against him, that they were motivated by racism. They wanted to bring down a successful black man. There was no basis for that claim, but they said it anyway. This was a man who lied about pretty much everything, as it would appear, from his childhood to whether or not he'd had brain tumours, cancers. In his own autobiography, apparently his memoir, published last week, in America, so it's out, we know that the draft versions claimed a different cancer from the one he eventually put in the book. I mean, claim after claim after claim, beyond questionable, OK? When I say, fantastical claims, in every sense of the phrase, he was not who he said he was. He was a Walter Mitty character, as I've written in the past. But I believe also he was a fraud and a con man, because he got a job at Cambridge over and above other more deserving candidates when he did not deserve that place. He was supposed to be teaching students who had paid, well, probably got into 50 grand's worth of debt to be taught, who'd worked really hard to get their A grades to get into that university, who were being taught very little by this man, because he wasn't qualified to do that. And when they complained, they were accused of racism. And when a fellow academic and when a journalist for a very reputable magazine in education questioned and sent him very polite emails. The police were set on them and accusations of racism as well and harassment. We have had a lot of talk about how the media have been hounding this man because he is black. I find those accusations to be both untrue and deeply, deeply, deeply immoral for people to make that claim. There may be some people who care about the colour of his skin. I don't care at all about the colour of someone's skin, but I then also wouldn't appoint someone and laud them because of the colour of their skin, whatever the colour of their skin was. We've got the most extraordinary situation in the wake of his death. We have got a petition from the Good Law Project, who originally organised that letter, basically calling for there to be a public inquiry into the media, manhunt of this man, which they blame for his death. We've got the head of a Cambridge college, this is Lord Woolley of Homerton College, Cambridge, saying that Jason Ardern had been subject to what he called the most horrendous, toxic, vicious witch hunt before his death. We've got another friend of the late academic, Sir Simon Baron-Cohen, another very senior figure who's an expert in autism, which Ardern claimed to have had. But he said it was important that there should continue to be an investigation into how he got his job. We have a crowdfund set up to raise money, originally just for his funeral, and now it's become a funeral and a memorial and help for Jason Ardern's family. It's now topped £145,000. Which is, I think we can all agree, one heck of a funeral. I'm not sure why there would be a memorial to a man who basically conned his way into a position of being lauded for things that he had not done. I find that very questionable indeed, while his family will want to remember him and his friends, obviously, and they should be left in peace to do so. That doesn't mean that we should not continue to have a conversation about how this man got his job and why so many who defended him and accused those who rightly questioned his credentials for the job and every other aspect of his life, why they are now, including me, being facing questions. By the way, I'm not a victim, I don't pretend to be of this. I just speak the truth. Simple as that. I call it out when I see it. Claiming that people like me and others are basically conducting a racist witch hunt against a man who, even in his resignation letter, chose to lie. He chose to continue the lies. I find extraordinary. What do you make of all of this? Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I forgot about it. And there's a vigil tonight in Trafalgar Square for this man as well. What do you make of it all?
He lied and deceived his way into a job for which he was not suitable or qualified for. And I would really be questioning Cambridge University, an elite institution in this country, as to why they put somebody in that position. I hold them wholly responsible
for that decision. Well, except that he also chose to embellish his CV and claim he had done things and held positions and written a book and things which he hadn't.
But surely...
No one forced him to lie.
No one forced him to lie, but also surely a university would be a little bit more careful putting somebody in
basic
as a
due
professor.
Diligence.
Yeah, absolutely due diligence. And you're right to point out that the victims are really the students who have paid an awful lot of money, worked incredibly hard to obtain a place, and they are going to have been sorely lacking in their education.
Some were marked down. Some of them are going to be suing, quite rightly.
And I understand that, and I would support them in that, because I think it is incredibly unfair that they've been put into a position of having an unqualified professor teaching them and having their grades decided upon that teaching. So there is an awful lot lacking. Cambridge, I don't believe, have really shown that they have taken any responsibility whatsoever.
Absolute egg on their face, and Jesus College, yeah.
They do, and for such an institution to do that, the world standing of that is now slipping down the ranks.
Oh,
they've only got themselves to blame.
They're laughing stock.
They have, but also all of the criticism coming out, are we not allowed to look at somebody whose skin colour is different? Do we not now investigate claims against them? I couldn't care less what colour, race, religion he was.
Cambridge cared, though, because they kept going on about it.
And that's the problem. So when you laud somebody as being that characteristic first, rather than their academic qualifications, and you're surprised when everybody sort of looks at them and says, oh, let's have a dig into the past of this individual, we want to know a bit more about them. It is just ridiculous that the media, people like you, are being absolutely blamed for this, when it isn't. It's not down to you to make that decision.
I genuinely couldn't care less about the criticism of me. I care less. I care more about the people who are victims in this.
Yeah, and this is it, and that's what I care about. And I think the students are the ones being forgotten in all of this.
No, and all the people accused of racism and who had the police called on them.
And the people
for doing their jobs.
Exactly. And the people sitting there in Trafalgar Square or wherever tonight and not going to even understand
Can
that.
I say, also, really not doing either the race relations in this country any good, or indeed, you know, young black people who want to get here, the people who actually, you know, work hard and are actually honest and true to, and have got these achievements. And there are plenty of them, by the way. That you're holding up a man who was basically living a lie his entire life as someone to put him on a pedestal. I think that is deeply, deeply wrong, and will horribly backfire. And the fact that people are, well, he became not such a useful victim for them after he'd resigned, OK? And more was being exposed about his lies. Now he's a victim again. The left, I would say, the race baiters, are using him in death as they used him in life.
Yeah.
I'm not. Other people who just want the truth to come out. I'm a journalist. I don't think people should get jobs based on lies, and whether they're white or black. And there's a whole list of people on social media saying, what about this professor of plagiarism? What is it? No, but he wasn't invited onto the Day programme to guest edit, and he wasn't lauded every day. He didn't sell his memoirs for 1.4 million reputedly. You know, I'm sorry, that, you know, that's not the same case. And they talk about other white people who've lied. There have been numerous cases of people who have lived a lie, who've been exposed. There are Netflix series about these people. There are even people talking about like how, oh, people didn't do so much about Hugh Edwards. It was a front-page story for months and months and months. He lost his job. He's now got a criminal conviction. Really? Really, you're going to play that game? I mean, have a long, hard look in the mirror. Because if this man is your idol, if this man is the one that you want to, you know, this is your hill, I think you're making a very, very big mistake. And I think you're embarrassing yourself. And you are using him. And now either this man was, you know, a con man, or he was mentally ill and fantasist, or both. Either way, you're the ones using him, not people pointing out the truth. Because pointing out facts, pointing out the truth is never, ever wrong. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Love to hear your thoughts on what Robert Jenrick has to say. Love to hear your thoughts. You want to talk about how terrified you were by that ridiculous emergency mobile alert. We're going to talk a little bit later about whether or not we think that the Prime Minister might call an early election in 2027. Love to hear your thoughts on any and all of those stories. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 10:31 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. Sue is in Kent and wants to talk about these welfare announcements from Robert Jenrick of Reform. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I wanted to make a comment about the PIP payment.
Yeah.
With PIP, because I'm on PIP, I had to get information from my doctors. I had to go before a panel and then a tribunal.
Was that quite a long time ago?
It was a fair few years, yes. But also when you get your cars, they actually take the payment for those cars out of the PIP that you get. But saying all that, I agree with an overhaul of the benefit system. I do think there are a lot of people pulling the wool over people's eyes.
Yeah.
And as for speaking over the phone to see if you can get PIP, I've never heard of anything so ridiculous in all my life.
Exactly.
Anybody could sit there and say, oh, I've got this, I've got that, I suffer from this and that. You know, they've made it so easy. And I just wanted to...
Yeah, but do you mind me asking, and feel free not to answer because it's your personal business, do you mind me asking what you're getting PIP for?
Yes, I've got Sjogren's disease, fibromyalgia, clinical depression and spinal difficulties, which I'm now under a hospital for.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I certainly know fibromyalgia in terms of just absolutely pain and the debilitating physical impact that can. I know people who suffer from that in my own family. But this is the thing. So, so we go to work, we pay taxes, and we can contribute to helping you. I mean, who's got a problem with that? I don't have a problem with that. I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. But not for people who are swinging the lead. It's not complicated, is it?
Yeah, Julia. I actually felt guilty. I actually felt like I was, wrong for even applying for it.
Because you're a good person. Because you've got.
My family's never done that. My brother had terminal cancer, and he worked right up, as long as he could. We just haven't done that.
No, well, that says a lot about, your family and you. And, but, really interesting call. See, thank you very much. And I wish you the very best. I'm sure everyone listening does as well. Thank you. Robert is on the line. He's in London. Robert, you want to talk about Jason Arday and the aftermath of his death on Friday?
Yeah. Look, Julia, I take the very human position here. And I think that the guy, obviously, he was talking, some of the things he claims he made were ridiculous. But he was incentivized by a system that is just obsessed with DEI. And it's crazy, some of the stuff they say, right? I think the man being a woman having penis or all that stuff really was the tipping point for a lot of people, that we were just descending into a world not based on logic or science or whatever. And people started to wake up when they started making those claims. But this young man, I would argue that he was weaponized, and the entire system went towards giving him money. His book advanced reportedly 1.4 million. He was given fame, fortune, recognition. We know that fame and fortune can inflate the ego, and a young person might not be able to handle that, especially if they are vulnerable. And I'm not making...
he was 37 when he became a Cambridge professor.
Okay.
He wasn't that young.
He wasn't. No, he wasn't that young. Okay, no, fair enough. So
he wasn't 18.
I think the system, I'm going to go as far as to say, I think this DEI matrix machine that makes a lot of money out of this madness basically encouraged him and incentivized him and made him mentally ill, because you're being asked all the time and you're being put on TV to come out with more and more outlandish rubbish. And then, all of a sudden, and imagine this happened to you, right? Not, it wouldn't be the same because you're not spewing all the nonsense. But imagine all your so-called professional network literally turned its back on you, collapsed, won't take a phone call from you. Yeah. There's a rival radio station where the guy on Friday was basically saying, this guy, he tried to get in touch with me. He was... he thought he could hoodwink me from some more. This guy was proudly stating he wasn't going to be mugged off by the guy.
Yes, right? I know who you're talking about, yeah. Yeah,
we all know who we're talking about, right? And then the guy commits suicide. Blood is on all these people's hands. I'm not going to say names, right? But we all know who the main culprits are. On the left, in the media, they pushed this guy. I believe they made him mentally unwell, because somewhere deep down, what you're saying is nonsense, but you're doing it for the money and the fame.
It's addictive.
All responsible.
Well, look, I personally think that he is responsible for his lies, but I also think if we're going to point the finger at anyone, else, it is those who used him on the left, I think, and not people who called it out on the right, or by the way, and on the left. Robert, really interesting call. Thank you very much indeed, Robert in London. There, I'd love to hear your thoughts on those stories and plenty more. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. 10:37 this time. Up next, going to be talking to Reform UK councillor Darren Grimes. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. Darren Grimes joins us now. He's a Reform UK councillor. In fact, he's deputy leader of Durham County Council, which is still a job title that makes me tickle. Darren Grimes, good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Well, your lot are having a very, very busy time. But not only, you know, Clacton by-election and all of that, but a major announcement. Basically, we've got 3 announcements on welfare over Sunday, Monday. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, because we've got Robert Jenrick initially announcing this £50 billion cut from welfare by abolishing person dependence payments, in-person reviews and all of that. We've got the announcement that's in the papers today, banning 1 million plus foreigners from claiming benefits, pretty much almost all benefits. And we know in Robert Jenrick's speech, due to start in about 20 minutes' time, there'll be further announcements as well affecting Brits. But, I mean, certainly these are the sort of announcements I think that an awful lot of people, not just Reform voters, would welcome. What do you make of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, the welfare state, fundamentally, it only works if people paying into it believe that the system is basically fair. You know, you work, you go out, you pay your taxes, they get higher and higher, you obey the law. And when you or your family genuinely fall on hard times, that there is some safety net there to catch you if that happens. But somewhere along the road, Julia, as you document on this show day after day, we've gone totally off the track when it comes to national welfare into something that resembles not only a welfare system that's grown and grown for an increasing number of conditions, especially in the sphere of mental health, but actually an international welfare system as well, with about 1.3 million people who are neither British nor Irish actually receiving universal credit in February of this year. So that's going up and up, and by the end of this decade, it's going to go up even further, and that means that billions that could be spent on defence of the realm is being spent on welfare. It's unsustainable, and it's massively, massively out of touch.
It's fascinating how the reaction, we know what the reaction will be on the Labour backbenchers.
Oh, yeah.
The exact reaction was when Keir Starmer tried to cut, and this was bizarre, he tried to cut £5 billion from the increase in disability benefits, rather than actually cutting the number of people who are entitled to them, i.e. lots of people who don't need them and shouldn't get them. And they still objected to that. Andy Burnham has barely touched on this subject whatsoever. There's no expectations going to be anything about that. The Tories have talked about dealing with this issue, and whatever the situation is after the general election, you know, if either your parties or the joint coalition, it sounds like this is something that will be dealt with, and that it is untenable that it cannot be dealt with. However, there is a particular issue over EU citizens, isn't there? Because there was this deal as part of the reciprocal deal under Brexit, which is that EU citizens would be entitled to claim benefits in perpetuity if they obviously had registered. And we had about, 4.5 million plus, I think about over 5 in total EU citizens who basically said, who basically went on the list and went, yeah, we've been here for a number of years, we can prove we've been here, we're staying here. But we've also got maybe around the 1.3 million mark of British citizens who are over in Europe. Now, how many of those are claiming benefits or need the benefits? We don't know. What are you going to do about that? Because I have a funny feeling the EU won't like it.
Yes, as well, they're not going to like anything that we do as far as the EU is concerned, Julia, because we would actually be renegotiating that withdrawal agreement because we don't fundamentally think that it works for Britain. So that all of that's going to have to come back again. But, we would urge people that have been here for quite a number of years. There'll be EU citizens who've been in this country longer than I've been on this planet, Julia. But ultimately, applying for British citizenship, a British passport, that's what's going to actually enable you to be able to access the same services, pay the same taxes and all the rest of it as everybody else. But yeah, that's going to have to be reopened, and it's going to have to be looked into once again, because we're not of the view that what was negotiated was a good deal for Britain.
Well, indeed, and I've always just thought it's quite bizarre. Or it's entirely up to another country whether they would let me come in and work and what wage or what deal. And it's entirely up to them when they've had enough for me to leave. And if I'm not making a contribution, not entirely sure why I should be. There is an idea, well, if people have been paying taxes, they've been paying national insurance, they've contributed, they should get those benefits or pensions or anything else. But of course, the reality is most people, and we know particularly in terms of, I mean, there are some countries where they average are definitely net contributors, many countries where that is not the case. But most people, even who are born and bred here, don't pay enough tax or national insurance even while working full time to pay for their share of the costs of public services. We know that the top 1% are paying for 30% of everything, top 10% for 60% of everything when it comes to the income tax side of things. So there is an argument, even if people have paid in for many years, unless they're a very high earner, the odds are they still haven't covered them being on benefits if they do fall on hard times.
No, indeed. And there are other countries around the world, Julia, who would look at Britain. We're very unique in this and see universal credit, housing benefit, most other, non-contributory benefits are being restricted to their own nationals. Yeah. They'd say, well, yeah, that makes total sense.
Quite bizarre.
To me. Yeah, absolutely.
We are an outlier on that.
We definitely are. And we're saying that if you come here, the expectation should be that you come here and support yourself. You support your own family. Under the Boris wave, we've actually had millions coming here and bringing dependents with them that then take out of the welfare state. So you end up in a cycle where, as you say, we're not making enough in tax revenue in order to cover the cost of the paying for dependents. And therefore, it's this cycle where actually the benefits bill just continues to grow and grow and grow alongside a population that grows and grows and grows.
It is quite extraordinary when you look at all the benefits that people are entitled to. I mean, not just universal credit, but housing benefit, pension credit, job seekers allowance, child benefit, free childcare and disability benefits. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary that is just handed out willy-nilly. There's going to be another announcement we know from Robert Jenrick, which I think will also be very interesting and certainly one I would support. And again, I'm not party political, I just call it if I like a policy. Let's also ask though about, you just had your party leader has just won his seat again back in Clacton. It was never really up for debate. Still facing that investigation over whether or not he should have declared, he should have, that £5 million donation from his crypto billionaire mate, Christopher Harborne, and other investigations as well. It is certainly a possibility he may be found to have broken parliamentary rules. Certainly a possibility he may be suspended from the House for more than 10 days, at which point we could see a recall petition and possibly another by-election. Very likely he would win that. However, how much damage has this whole affair done to your party? Because there's a lot of talk about how Reform have peaked in the polls, and Andy Burnham should be looking at a 2027 general election to make the most of that.
No, look, Julia, I think on all of the difficult decisions, such as welfare reform, which, as you say, the Labour Party couldn't get their backbenchers to support, even a 5 billion fewer payments being made as far as an increase in benefits is concerned. They can't do it. They can't act on the fundamentals that matter, be that net zero, reducing the cost of living, the welfare reform, mass migration. They're not willing to take the decisions that we would be absolutely willing to do in the national interest. And the Tories, they came along and they said, Kemi was in the press saying, well, look, Clacton deserves better than Nigel Farage. Well, go on then, love. Put someone up to stand against him. She didn't do that, did she? They talk a good game, but actually fundamentally, they have a lot of people within their own party that don't back leaving the ECHR, that are a bit more wedded to net zero than perhaps Kemi Badenoch would actually like. So the real deal, if you want full fat Farage, you've got to vote for it.
Full fat Farage. I'm going to put that. Claire Pearson is grimacing. I'll put that to her in a moment. But I do want to ask your thoughts on the subject, which has been dominating social media, certainly, for the last few days, and that is the death of Jason Arday, believed to have taken his own life, found dead on Friday. He leaves a wife and children, which is very, very sad for his family, other family members and friends, and obviously we have sympathy for them. However, he was a liar. He was someone who had basically defrauded his way to a job that he didn't deserve. He was found out, forced to resign. He doubled down on the lies. We've had thousands of academics, the great and the good, politicians and others who've insisted, he was only hounded out because of his race. We've now had a doubling down on that from them, basically saying that we should have a public inquiry into the media, racist hounding of him. There's £145,000 now at the crowdfunder for his funeral and a memorial, apparently. And there's a vigil for him tonight in Trafalgar Square. What do you make of the reactions across the board to Jason Arday's death?
Yeah, Julia, look, suicide is absolutely horrific and rips apart families. So I have no doubt that your listeners will be saying, look, my heart goes out to them, absolutely. But I do think we've somewhat lost the plot here. You know, after the murder of Anne Widdecombe, right, we had members of the left coming out to jump on her before the body was even cold. And now we've got a man who has been in the press for committing, as you say, untruths. And actually, they're coming out saying we need a memorial to the man. I mean, I can't work out how you reach that conclusion, that actually there isn't a fundamental position here that needs to be addressed. And the principle has to be pretty simple, doesn't it? That actually, if you are an institution like Cambridge, a world-renowned university, that actually you're vetting, and dare I say the mainstream media outlets like Sky and the BBC, who gave platform to this man in the most grandiose and ego-massaging ways, they were puff pieces. He had the easiest ride of anybody, and it was all built on a pack of lies. And something's gone wrong here. And it is down to the fact that actually boxes were ticked, convenient narrative was told, and then subsequently they said, this is great. This is exactly what we need. Post the BLM, absolute madness that we had, this is exactly something that we need to showcase ourselves to the world with. Despite the fact, you know, I feel for the students being accused of white privilege, for example. I think that's absolutely disgusting. Like, Julia, you got into a very, very good university, right? And if your professor, who didn't have a right to be there, didn't work as hard as you have to get there, told a pack of lies, turns around and tells you that you're guilty of white privilege, I think you've got a right to be damn angry, actually.
I mean, they were blatantly accused of racism and marked down some of his students for questioning it. Really good to talk to you. Darren Graham's Reform UK councillor. Thank you, as always, for joining us. 10:50 this time. Quick response to Claire Pizzle, particularly going back to what he had to say about the Tories.
I think Reform needs to get a handle on this 5 million donation gift, what it is, because unfortunately that isn't going away for them. They don't have an answer.
Doubling down on it.
He does, and it isn't working. So they need to actually come head to head with this, because there is an investigation that's been restarted. We saw that. They need to take it seriously and answer questions.
If he declared it first time round, as I've always thought he should have,
then we wouldn't be here, would we?
I don't think it would be. I've still got a big question mark about people giving 5 million quid
so
to
do
people. I mean,
but it would have been
old-fashioned like that. But I don't want any big money at all anywhere near politics. But, you know, that's just me. 10:50 is the time. Up next, going to be talking to our favourite former Met face detective, Peter Bleksley, about the latest, well, yet again, troubling crime stories. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. It's fast approaching 10:53. Let's talk to Peter Bleksley. He's a former Metropolitan Police Detective. Morning.
Good morning.
I don't know why I'm sounding cheery, because as usual we come to you because there's some rather worrying stories in the news. One of the front page stories today, paedophiles are avoiding jail under Labour's sentencing law change. What is this all about?
Well, this is down to the Sentencing Act, which comes into power in October. And a ridiculous situation arose last week, whereby a judge wanted to sentence an offender to 18 months in prison. This offender had entered an early guilty plea. So because of the nonsense handed down by the Sentencing Council, the judge had to apply a third discount on that sentence. Yep. That brought the sentence down to a year. Judges and magistrates are told if a sentence of a year is applied, you have to suspend it. Don't send them to prison.
Yeah.
So that person was given a suspended sentence.
Let's clarify that that person was a man who had huge number of indecent images of abuse of children, very young children, including hundreds plus of Category A images, which is basically rape of young children.
Yes.
And that's what he had on his computer, and he had collected them over a period of 2 years, and he hasn't even been given a prison sentence.
Absolutely.
I'm sure I think we all feel completely relaxed about that, don't we?
And there are so many other similar cases.
Yeah.
And besides, the bar is way too high in terms of sending these people to prison. So many thousands of offenders are out there that have not received jail terms.
Yeah.
Hugh Edwards, for example, should have gone to prison.
Oh, absolutely.
But unfortunately, these people don't. We all know the crisis within the criminal justice system. And what does it mean? That some of these utterly revolting people who simply cannot be rehabilitated, who indulge themselves in the most depraved way possible, are free and are amongst and are in the streets, the high streets.
Oh, absolutely. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Well, one person who thankfully isn't free is Henry Novak's evil killer. However, he has been allowed to have prison-to-prison videos, front page of The Sun today, video calls with his mother, who is also behind bars. And a lot of people will be angry and upset about this, given, you know, well, Henry Novak's mum doesn't get to video call her son, does she? Yeah,
Vikram Dikra's co-conspirator mother, who hid the murder weapon in an effort to try and absolve herself of her son of being held responsible for the wicked, evil murder that he carried out. But really, what we've got here at the heart of this ridiculous story is, guess what? Human rights legislation. Now, this is how we've got the nation into such a dreadful mess, because you would think that a prison governor who wants to run his prison with discipline, with order, with a respect for the rules and the regulations, would be able to award privileges to prisoners who comply, who keep the peace, who don't cause any problems, who accept their offending, who try to rehabilitate. Those kind of people, I'm all up for them having privileges once they've earned them. But now, because we are so enmeshed in human rights legislation, because we have an industry of human rights lawyers, Dickwell now can have video calls with his mother, because not to give him that privilege would be a breach of, guess what, drum roll, his human rights.
We also have this absurd situation, the Mail's published this, Jason Brown, dubbed a danger to women and children after repeatedly legally, bizarrely, changing his name to shield his criminal past. He basically formed relationships with unsuspecting partners and basically was able to basically prey on women and children. Every time he got caught, he simply changed his name. He was first convicted 12 years ago. He disappears, starts again. He has changed his name some 20 times, and it's all completely legal. And, of course, then people do checks on these people. No criminal record, because under that name, doesn't have a criminal record. And we've seen that issue, haven't we, not also with men claiming they are now trans women, having a women's identity. You can't dead name them. And therefore, but I mean, in this case, you know, this man was able to just, you know, abuse far more women and children because of this absurd situation in law.
Yeah, paedophiles will always create opportunities for their offending. And that's why people have to be on absolute red alert in regards to these people. And, of course, changing his name was a part of that. Change identity, change location, create another opportunity to offend. But I've lost count of the amount of times that I've filled in various forms, and when I've entered my name, the next line has said, have you ever been known by a different name? This could quite simply be applied in these situations.
Are these men likely to be honest, though?
But if he's not, once again, quite simply be catered for by handing down a prison term for any breach of that. In other words, breach of a sex offenders order, breach of any other court order, you lie on that form, you go to prison. It's really really very simple and could be achieved if only this country was not run by idiots.
There is that, isn't it? I'm really annoyed. We've only got about 30 seconds more, but we've also got a survey basically showing Britons vastly overestimate the number of crimes that are taking place, the number of sex crimes, the number of violent crimes, and that crime over the last 3 decades has gone down, not up. But that's not our perception, and it's not what the stats say, the regular crime surveys say. Very briefly, what do you put that down to?
You cannot trust crime statistics because so much crime is not reported. Crime is rampant. About the only stat we could remotely trust is the murder stat. The rest of them, don't believe a word.
Well, this is the thing. I was thinking, oh, well, crime's gone down. And yeah, I know more people who've been a victim of crime in the last few years than I've known probably for about 15 years before then. Peter Blexley, always so great to talk to you, former Metropolitan Police Detective. I'll get the sorts of Claire Pistol on that after the break. We are going to be taking some of Robert Jenrick's speech live. He's going to be making major announcements on what reform would do in terms of tackling the welfare ballooning benefits bill. It involves not only foreigners not being entitled to claim pretty much all benefits, crack down on people claiming PIP, and there will be another announcement which we'll bring to you as soon as he has spoken about it's under embargo. Lots more to talk about. What your thoughts on all of this? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. Fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Delighted to have your company, whether you're listening on DAB+ Radio, watching on YouTube, all the other ways of listening and watching. Great to have you here. And if you do miss anything from the show, or you've already missed the first hour, we'll be having words. Don't forget to go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we are going to discuss Reform UK, saying that if they win power, foreign nationals will be banned from most benefits. There's a whole raft of benefits foreign nationals, for some bizarre reason, have been entitled to claim and are still entitled to claim. Robert Jenrick, their Treasury spokesman, is going to be speaking in the next few moments. He's not speaking just yet. We'll take some of his speech live about that. We know he's also talked about Reform planning to cut £50 billion from the welfare bill. I mean, we probably need to cut more than that overall if we're going to have it sustainable, but £50 billion is a darn good start. Abolishing PIP, personal dependence payments, they reckon they can get basically, I mean, probably more than half of the 5 million or so claimants on personal dependence payments basically off that. And basically, you know, you're not going to get extra. If you've got a minor issue, anxiety, there's no reason why you should get any extra money or eligibility for a car or the right not to look for work because of your minor issue or ailment or mental health problem. If you've got serious concerns, they are saying, and again, the proof will be in the pudding. We hold people to the account. We don't care what party they are. We hold them to the account on these things. Then you know that you will still get your benefits, but you'll have in-person interviews. That's absolutely crucial, isn't it? But also, people may be able to get more because we've got who need it, rather than just handing it out to pretty much anyone who goes, I've got a sniffle on a Monday morning. So we're going to be talking about that. There is going to be another announcement that comes today in that speech, so we'll let you know about that as soon as we can. We're also going to be talking more about Jason Arde. He committed suicide, it is believed, on Friday. He was found dead by his family, very sadly, for his family and his friends. But it would appear he is being used in death as much as in life by those on the left who want to claim, yet again, and are still claiming, that it was the media, brackets, the racist media, close brackets, which is responsible for, in their words, hounding Jason Arde to his death. That is not what happened. It's what the head of a Cambridge college, not the one that employed him under false pretexts, but another college, is saying that. There's a vigil for him tonight. People are contributing to a crowdfunder for, originally it was just for his funeral, then it became a funeral memorial and to help his family. Given that Jason Arde had a reputedly very large, very, very large, minimum 6 figures, possibly could have been 7 figures, we don't know, book advance for his memoir, his autobiography, which turns out to be also a pack of lies, along with his CV. He was on a 6-figure salary by all accounts at Cambridge and had numerous other employment opportunities. I find it personally extraordinary that people think that the financial help is needed for a family who will be in much better financial state than most people in this country, with all due respect. There's a vigil tonight. We're going to be talking to a guest coming up very soon who actually has contributed to that fund, which will be a very interesting conversation. I think you'll agree. We'll also be talking about what's going on in the Middle East. The Middle East envoy for Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, has arrived in Israel for talks after meeting with Hamas to discuss the US-backed Gaza peace plan. We're going to be talking about all of that. Right now, though, let's go live to the Reform press conference in Westminster right now, where Robert Jenrick, the Treasury spokesman, is speaking.
And moral society is judged by how it treats the powerful, but also by how it protects the vulnerable. Those are the words of John Stuart Mill, the 19th century MP and philosopher. And they're as true today as they were when he wrote them. That is the measure of a society and a country. It was a baton picked up by William Beveridge in his 1940s work, which laid the foundations for the modern welfare state as we know it today. But he understood that to ensure fairness in this new system, there would need to be a new social contract, which conferred both rights and responsibilities. He said a cooperation between the state and the individual. The state would give security for service and contribution, but it would not stifle incentive, opportunity, and responsibility. We would receive benefit in return for contribution, rather than always free allowances from the state. And for those of us who couldn't work because of physical disability or conditions which meant we had no choice, they would always be protected. The state, the community, would step in so that they could live their lives to the fullest possible extent. It's these principles, ladies and gentlemen, which guide Reform's approach to welfare today. Those in need, pensioners, children, the vulnerable, our armed forces veterans will always be protected under a reform government. It is part of who we are. It is part of what drove each and every one of us into politics. It's why our party's banner is family, community, country. But for those who break the social contract, who act, for whatever reason, out of selfishness, to take from the community when their family, their friends, their neighbours, their colleagues all really know that they don't need it, there will have to be a change of approach to restore fairness. It's accepted now, I believe, that the bond that William Beveridge spoke about has been broken. I've certainly heard it all over the country, in countless conversations on the doorsteps in my own constituency. I think everybody in this room has heard it in conversations that they've had themselves. Why has this happened? Partly because politicians in the Labour Party believed that they could buy votes by simply doling out more and more cash with fewer and fewer checks. Also, partly because the Tories, my former party, latterly were too afraid to uphold Beveridge's principles for fear of a backlash. As a result, by 2031, the annual tax burden to pay for welfare on every family in Britain will reach £7,000 a year. Some of that money, a lot of that money, is paying for those people who are in genuine need, on pensions for the elderly, on assistance for the seriously disabled, on providing modest support for carers. But too much of what we spend is not helping those who really need it. Furthermore, 1 in 6 universal credit claimants is not even a British or Irish citizen. 55 billion to foreigners in the last 4 years alone. Just imagine what that money could have done to make the lives of British people better, like lowering their taxes, investing in hospitals and schools, filling the potholes in the roads. The British taxpayer is acting as the welfare state for the world. That's unfair. We all know it. There are 6.6 million working-age people in the UK claiming out-of-work benefits. Among their number are many who can work, who should work, but have chosen not to. And the system's allowed that to persist. These people are really taking advantage of their fellow citizens, their friends, their neighbours, their community. And disability and incapacity claims have doubled in less than a decade, with more than 4 million people now claiming. Britain is not twice as sick as it was just a few years ago. We all know that. Even without looking particularly hard, we know that almost £9 billion was also lost to identified fraud and error last year alone because of the sheer incompetence by which the system has been managed. In towns and cities up and down the country, working people tell stories of those in their communities who are pulling a fast one, taking everyone for fools. The family who enjoy regular holidays, nights out, who have new Motability cars on the drive, but who, out of choice, haven't seen a day's work for years, sometimes decades. That is fundamentally unfair. What was a source of pride for British people, a marker that we all live in a civilized society, has become viewed by many people as a joke. And in the cold light of day, has to be seen, I believe, as both a moral and an economic catastrophe. A broken contract, which too often takes from those who choose to work and hands to those who choose not to. It's also fundamentally unsustainable. For every £1 we spend on defence this year, we will spend £8 on welfare. £8 on welfare. We also live in a time of unprecedented change for working people. Everything we thought we knew is being turned upside down. Good jobs, outsourced overseas. Disastrous energy policies, deindustrializing huge parts of our country. And now, AI hollowing out the very middle class and graduate jobs that people thought would replace the industrial jobs that were lost in recent decades because of bad policies. Beveridge wrote in a time when Britain, ravaged by war, felt broken. Even in victory, it was exalted, but exhausted. Today, Britain feels broken again and faces huge challenges. It needs leadership. It needs reform. We need a welfare state that answers those challenges, but which is built on the principles that built the welfare state we enjoy today. So I'm setting out how a reform UK government will fix Britain's broken welfare schemes to restore fairness to the system, caring for those who are unable to support themselves, helping those who can towards independence, opportunity, and to take full advantage of life. And always keeping sight of that belief, contribution from those who can make it, for security for those who can't. It's a plan that will get 241,000 British people back into work, to save the taxpayer £51 billion a year, £1,700 for every family in our country. We'll begin by ending the foreign welfare rip-off. Under a reform government, only British citizens will be entitled to benefits. There will be limited exceptions: service in the armed forces, contributory state pensions for those who have paid their way. But beyond that, the line will be clear. The welfare state is there for Britain. No British citizenship, no entitlement. That's fair. If put in place today, this would save the taxpayer £21 billion a year by 2029, £700 per household, money that belongs to the British people, whether for public services or tax cuts. Fairness, too, lies in the heart of our proposed reforms to the disability system. We do not accept, and will not accept, that there's no alternative to watching the claimant count soar at a rate unmatched almost anywhere else on earth. We are consigning people who would otherwise be capable to a life on welfare, wasting their potential, heaping ever higher burdens upon those who do work. Under reform, this will end. But we'll make these reforms carefully, always protecting those who need help, in particular, the severely disabled. We'll introduce a new system of return-to-work cover based on a programme in the Netherlands, which will cut disability claims by 40%. The idea is very simple. For the first 2 years of an employee being signed off sick, they'll remain on their employer's books, receiving payments based on welfare rates. Employers' national insurance contributions will be cut nationally to offset those costs, giving the employers who know their workers best an incentive, firstly to look after them well when they are in work, and then to help them back into work if they're off sick, rather than just passing the bill to the taxpayer and forgetting about their workers. That's not the right way. And let's be clear, there should not be any additional financial burden on businesses. Reform has already set out a much more detailed plan than any other political party on how we will reduce the cost of employing people, like scrapping the increase in employers' national insurance for British workers. We'll always put working people first. We'll always make sure businesses can take on workers. Those unable to return to work will go through a single rigorous disability needs assessment, replacing today's many overlapping assessments. Cash support above standard universal credit rates will be reserved for severe cases. And those who need additional help beyond living costs will receive it in kind through disability support accounts. And the most vulnerable will continue to be supported through personal independence payments, reformed and enhanced as PIP health security allowances. We'll make other changes too. Reforming child DLA, new efforts to combat fraud and error, technical reforms to indexation and tapering, and the reinstatement of the two-child benefit cap. Together, with the steps above, these take our savings to £49 billion. Which brings me to the final change, and perhaps the biggest change of all. We've already set out plans to reverse Rachel Reeves' job-destroying tax funded by a levy on foreign workers, and to reinvigorate British business under Richard Tice by slashing red tape and energy costs, make this country competitive again. But we must also ensure that people who can work are incentivized to do so. There are more than 330,000 adults on universal credit capable of work and who are supposed to be out there looking for it, but who have reportedly been doing so for more than 12 months. This can't keep going on. We all know that. If taxpayers must contribute, so must those who are able to work also play their part. I'm therefore announcing that a Reform government will introduce a welfare to work scheme that will require long-term benefits claimants who are fit to work to provide 20 hours a week of work for their community, organised by their local council. They'll work to clean up high streets and parks, to beautify neglected places, to carry out minor repairs, to staff libraries and community centres, to perform many other tasks from the list that we've published today. We'll also embrace local charities and community groups and ask them to help us and take part. If claimants refuse to participate or fail to show up, they'll face penalties. Let me speak very plainly. If people who are capable of work refuse, then they'll get nothing. That's fair. How can it be that one family on a street with working parents strive, work hard, only to fund the lifestyle of another who chooses not to bother to work at all, who isn't even really looking for a job? This isn't just an aberration, a small number of very isolated cases to be dismissed as a rounding error. It's an epidemic that's been allowed to take hold across our country and has now spread into a full-blown national crisis. My message today, for those taking everyone else for mugs, under a Reform government, it's going to stop. Instead, if they're asking their neighbours to fund their lifestyle, whilst they choose to stay out of work, they can give something back in return. If they want to do something else, they can find a job. No more something for nothing. Under Reform, it's security for contribution. They will become part of Alarm Clock Britain too. Across the OECD, schemes like this markedly improve claimants' chances of finding work. Job seekers, like everybody else, will start work on time, and they'll do something for a living. They'll be given an incentive to find a job and still have the time to find the permanent, long-term one that they want. The taxpayer, meanwhile, will get something back in return. At the moment, that's just simply written off. The taxpayer, the community, will get cleaner high streets, properly maintained parks, a helping hand down at the library. We'll get our town centres looking smart again. We'll help councils improve their services again. We're not the first party to propose such a scheme, but unlike the old parties, we really mean it. We will pass the primary legislation to enable these changes happen. We'll repeal the Human Rights Act. We'll leave the ECHR and its foreign court. And we won't allow politicians from the old parties to block it. Councils which fail to implement work placements properly, in full, will face cuts to their funding. And with this final element in place, the total savings from the package that we announced today will reach more than £50 billion. Without these changes, The cost of the welfare system will keep going up and up and up. We will face a genuine national debt crisis. And what happens in those situations? It's the least well off who are always forced to bear the highest price. Only reform will do what it takes to avert this. Welfarism exploded in the final years of the last Conservative government under Mel Stride. According to her own party chairman today, Kemi herself blocked welfare reforms, which would have cut the bill. Today, both Kemi Badenoch and Mel Stride offer paper-thin ideas, literally so. Just their document they published was 3 pages long. They are content to simply tinker around the edges. Well, we're not. Reform is about real change. In 1942, Beveridge was very clear. The plan is not, he said, something for nothing without trouble, or something that will free the recipients forever from personal responsibility. It is this principle that Reform UK is restoring. The changes I've outlined will fix the social contract and prepare Britain for decades to come. Britain is broken. Reform will fix it. And today we do so with the biggest reform to our welfare system in my lifetime. Thank you very much.
Well, that was what Robert Jenrick just had to say. He's the shadow Treasury spokesman for the Reform Party. A bit of a dig at his old party, the Tories there. But as you heard, he talked about some of the announcements they made in the Sunday papers there about this huge cost of the welfare bill, particularly of people on universal credit and on PIP, personal independence payments to society, saying that the welfare state is there for British citizens. They want to save £21 billion a year by 2029. By limiting it to just British citizens. Disability system, they want to follow what the Dutch have done, which it hasn't, as he pointed out, has actually cut disability claims in Holland by 40%. I mean, it really did do that by simply making sure that if you go off sick, you have a disability or an illness, you basically stay on your employer's books. I guess that works if you're employed rather than freelance, doesn't it? For 2 years, and basically they have to have an insurance policy which will help pay for that. That though will be basically offset by a cut in national insurance payments, so no extra net cost to the businesses. But basically there'll be an incentive to businesses to get people back to work, to get them the whether it's the physiotherapy or the mental health treatment or whatever it is that could get those people back to work. So there'll be an incentive for them to be there, as opposed to just left on the scrap heap of life paid for by everybody else. But also, as you heard at the end, the new stuff there, that, by the way, savings of £49 billion in total, reforming child disability living allowance, also reinstating the 2-child benefit cap. Absolutely support that. It's an insane policy otherwise. Biggest change, he says, is requiring that people who can work. He says there are 330,000 adults on universal credit right now who've not on PIP, who've not said, oh, I've got too much anxiety, I can't work. They actually are officially looking for work, have not found work in a year, that they, after a year, will be required basically to do welfare to work scheme. 20 hours a week, whether it's gardening, whether it's cleaning up in the local town centre, whether it's working in the local library, whatever it is. Penalties if you don't show up, penalties if you don't show up on time. And basically, this way he says this will improve people's chances of getting back to work, get them back into the work habit, but also means that people who are paying their welfare will be getting something back. I've got to be honest with you, Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor who's joining me right now. What's not to like about any of that?
I don't hate it. I really don't.
You love it. Your husband is a right old lefty. He'll be appalled by this. This will be an attack. This will be an attack on the vulnerable.
Exactly. Maybe he'd like to cook his own tea tonight. Honestly, I will do it. I think it's really interesting, the welfare to work business. Yeah. I think that is probably one of the more interesting parts of this press conference, because if you have been unable to be employed for over a year, then you should be able to go out and do some sort of community service.
Well, something's going wrong. You're going to need some help. You're either not really looking,
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of people who are not really looking. And people, they put the wrong mobile number on their CV and things like that. They apply for jobs they're not remotely qualified for and go, I've applied for the number of jobs, can I have my universal credit, please?
Exactly, but this may focus their mind, as if they are really swinging the lead and not trying very hard. Suddenly you have to go out and sweep the streets, which is quite difficult work, especially in the winter weather.
And more useful, with all due respect, than what we do.
Well, absolutely.
Genuinely.
I hold my hands up.
I do worry, though. There are certain jobs people go, well, hold on a minute, that's my job. That's what I do right now.
Yeah, and you can understand that. So councils will be responsible. I'm not convinced that they've got the resources to be able to do it. But again, I'm not averse to looking at this. I think it's really important, teaching people the ability to get up, get out of bed, turn up to somewhere to do a job.
Do your bit.
Absolutely do that.
But also getting it happening. One of the things you do with your youngsters, we've both got teenagers, one of the first things they would have done would have been volunteering.
Yeah.
My daughter, I remember, worked at a charity shop every Sunday morning. Yeah, and you know what? And you turn up every Sunday morning.
Yeah.
That's the deal. And you do it, and you do the work, and you turn up with a smile on time, and doesn't matter you're not being paid, that's what you do. And then you've got that on your CV for when you try for a job, doing what the next job is.
My child has been poo picking a field. Horse field.
I was going to clarify. Can you pick horse poo up?
Oh, you absolutely can and should for the maintenance of a field.
It's hard. In this weather, it's hard.
Yeah.
There you are, people. There's poo picking jobs going. How much does poo picking pay?
Normally about sort of £7 or £8 per barrow. It's quite good because it's hard work.
Wow. Yeah. So now you know. There's jobs opportunities in Kent.
I'd
love to hear your thoughts, what you heard from Robert Jenrick there. I mean, really annoyingly, Claire, we lost a lot of our conversation time. Very, very frustratingly, because obviously of listening to Robert Jenrick. But I do think that was quite an interesting speech and it's worth talking about. And I do think also, crucially, it is very, very clear to me, even though, again, got a lot of time for Kemi Badenoch, as you know. I also understand why a lot of people don't have time for the Tories. She's much more popular than the party, given 14 years, But the crucial thing is that we know that a lot of Tory policies, whether or not they're things that Kemi Badenoch completely agrees and always want to do, they are, they basically moved themselves much closer to where reform has been for quite a long time. And reform are shifting the narrative, shifting what is acceptable, shifting the Overton window, as it's called, of what is considered normal. Now, the left are going to lose their minds about this. You're attacking the poor and the disabled. It doesn't matter how many times anyone from any party on the right or the left says, we want to protect people who are genuinely disabled and sick, and we want to give them more money and the help they really need, but we can't allow millions of people who don't need benefits to get benefits. Doesn't matter how many times you say that, they will always go, what about the genuinely disabled?
Yeah.
We've just covered that. But they don't hear it.
No, they don't, because they don't want to. A lot of comments this morning, before the press conference had even gone ahead, a lot of the sort of criticisms of reform were that there would be more deaths because of this. And it's like, that is a really bold statement to make. You don't know what the facts are. I think you need to wait and see. And there is nothing that's been said that is not reasonable.
Yeah.
I think the difficulty is putting it into practice. You're dealing with a large amount of money. You are dealing with the systems involved in it, which are never easy. The Dutch system has also got merit, but there are problems with the social insurance side of it for smaller businesses. So if you can look at that and you can say that parts of that work perfectly, parts of it need work, absolutely great. Yeah. You can do that.
Very interesting. We're going to go to a couple of your calls. We're also going to be talking in a few moments to Albie at Ancona. He is someone we spoke to already, actually, about Jason Ardé when he was still with us. Albie has actually contributed today to the crowdfunder, now topping £145,000 for Jason Ardé's funeral, memorial and for his family. We're asking him about that and what he makes of the reaction, the aftermath to Jason Ardé's death. That's coming up straight after. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:34 is the time. We're going to be getting to your calls. We're going to get to them after we speak to my next guest. Obviously, things are a bit topsy-turvy, taking a bit of that Reform press conference live. Robert Jenrick now taking questions. Any developments on that, we'll bring them to you. About welfare, I would love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 about Reform, saying they would ban 1 million foreigners living in Britain from claiming almost all benefits, saving £21 billion a year. Total bunch of changes they want to make, basically getting people into proper assessments in person and stopping people for mild anxiety from claiming any PIP benefits. They think they'll total outcome to 49 billion, but they also want 330,000 adults in this country who've been looking for work for more than a year, able-bodied, able-minded, basically going to have to do 20 hours a week, well, effectively volunteering that's not really volunteering, welfare to work, volunteering, doing work for their local council, gardening, work in the library, cleaning things up. I mean, you know, worthwhile work. So people paying their benefits get something back and they get an incentive to, you know, find that job they found so elusive for the last year. All that coming up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of it. 0344 499 1000. Right now, let's talk more about the case of Jason Arday. In the news, I say, for all the wrong reasons, for the last last few weeks now. We're told that he was, very sadly, found dead on Friday. Leaves a wife and children, of course, other family members and friends. And there is a vigil for him tonight at 6 o'clock in Trafalgar Square. There is a crowdfunder for him. I think it's topped, I think hitting £150,000 mark, for initially just for his funeral, now for a memorial and for his family. And we're told also there should be an investigation into the media and the way the media treated him, and calls for censorship of the media. Let's talk about all of this with writer and commentator Albie Amankona. Good morning to you, Albie.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you
what
for
a terrible turn of events since the last time we spoke.
We last spoke, and again, we certainly didn't agree entirely on where we were in terms of this story and how Jason Arday had been treated. He had resigned from his post at Cambridge Press, so having basically been found out for basically being a liar and a fraudster. I think fraudster is not too strong a word. You actually expressed, and I agreed with you, expressed concerns that, you know, you didn't want anything bad to happen. Someone resigns from their job, having been lauded, found out, their whole world falls apart, and sadly, this is what has happened. Can I ask you first, though, your reaction when you heard the news on Friday night that he had been found dead?
I was devastated. In fact, the way that I found out the news was one of your colleagues, a producer for another show, asked me what my view was on the death of Jason Arday and whether or not I could come and join whoever was presenting that show that evening. I was actually busy, so I couldn't come on. But I was shocked. It was the first I'd heard of the news. It was before any of the news alerts had come through from whichever publication it is that I have the apps downloaded for. I was shocked. I was sad. I was upset. I was really, because as you may remember from our conversation last week, this outcome was something I was concerned about and something I had been speaking about in the media, and I had been encouraging people to have compassion for someone that was in a very difficult situation, yes, but also I was also very clear that in my view he had probably done wrong, and it was possible to have both of those thoughts in your head at the same time. You
don't have to kick a man when he's down, basically.
You can be critical of someone's actions whilst at the same time be compassionate about the situation that they find themselves in. And he had actually said publicly and openly that the pressure of the entire situation had been getting to him, and it seems that too few people listened.
Indeed. I would absolutely not have wanted him to take his own life, 100%. I don't think, I mean, you'd have to be really quite sick to wish that on him. And on his family, who certainly his children, the biggest victims here. However, I would also say that, you know, he was in that position because of all of his own actions. A lot of people are blaming Cambridge University, Jesus College, and many others, the media on the left that bigged him up and turned him into this sort of cause celeb, and who backed him when there were question marks of plagiarism and made him into, I suppose, this big star, which when everything exploded around him and he was exposed as basically having just told lie after lie after lie after lie and was basically, let's face it, in a situation where he could do nothing but resign from his post he'd been appointed to at Cambridge University, that would be devastating for him. And yet the reaction online from the left, I posted about this at the weekend. I waited about 23 hours because I was quite, taken aback. I shouldn't have been. I shouldn't have been shocked but by the reaction on the left, who doubled down and insisted that not only was the initial questioning of Jason Arday's credentials for his job racist and a media and a witch hunt, but that all the questioning of him since that point had also been that, and that it was the media that had hounded him to his death. I assume they didn't include The Guardian, who had written one of the most devastating pieces about Jason Arday in terms of it exposing one of his lies. Do you think that he has been the victim of a racist witch hunt, a media hunt of a man, because many are claiming the colour of his skin?
I don't know the left-right framing of this, if I may, Julia. And The Guardian has been getting criticism from some people on the left, I would say. So is The Times, so is The Telegraph. Even outlets like Novara Media, who have covered the story, have been getting criticism. Anyone who's covered the story has been getting criticism. Personally, I think that is wrong. I think it is important for the media to report on the facts, report on the truth, expose institutional and individual failure where they find it. That is the job of the media. But I also think that some of the commentary around Jason Arday's death, after his death, and indeed before his death, has really been quite disheartening. And I'm afraid, Julia, I didn't like your Twitter posts on this whatsoever.
Why not?
I thought they were distasteful.
In what way?
I thought they were completely distasteful, in a similar way to how I felt after Anne Widdecombe was taken from us. This is someone that I knew, someone that I worked with at Channel 5. There were people on the left who would say, yes, well, she's been murdered, but she was also a homophobic bigot. And I think some of the
people were saying she deserved to be murdered.
Yes, and I thought that was distasteful, right?
Well, it's more than distasteful, it's horrific.
And what I'm saying is, Julia, I felt a similar way to the comments that you and others on the right made about Jason Arday after his death.
I'm intrigued to know which comments, because I stand by every word I wrote.
Well, good. I'm sure you would.
I wouldn't have written it otherwise. I mean, I wrote. It was very long, lengthy. I've got it printed out in front of me. But I was suggesting that Cambridge University asked themselves questions, family and friends who didn't expose his lies, the police who investigated journalists for doing their jobs, the BBC and his deluded cheerleaders who basically, asked themselves about why they continued to push him. And it seems to me, I don't think I know for a fact there was nothing I wrote that wasn't factually true.
Julia, we had a similar version of this conversation last week when you mentioned that actions have consequences. And I said, actions have consequences, but we can still have compassion for other people.
I pointed out that I felt sorry for his family.
Difficult situations. And in particular, I thought your more recent post, which I think discouraged people from donating to his fundraiser.
Yes.
Have someone that has actually donated his fundraiser.
You donated this morning and said, let me go into this, because
I thought that was very distasteful.
A crowdfunder was set up for Jason Arday's funeral initially. And then I think it's changed. I don't think it said memorial first. Well, now it says memorial and for Jason Arday's family. Now, we know lots of situations where there are people who, for instance, they lose a loved one and financial difficulty they're in, looking after their children, paying for a funeral, there are costs, and people are very generous in this country and help. My view was, and I expressed it, and I stand by it, which is that it was claimed there was a $1.4 million book advance. It may well not have been as big as that. He was on a roughly £100,000 salary as a Cambridge professor. He had numerous other things for which he were very lucrative payments. This was not a necessary crowdfund for a family in financial need, and I suggested that people should give their money to a more deserving cause than a family who financially don't need financial help. I don't think that was what... I'm not quite sure. I've got a preference on what I would give money to. Someone might say they would rather give money to children who are dying rather than, a donkey sanctuary or whatever. People might have their preferences on what they give money to. I don't think anyone would have been put off giving their money to that cause because I suggested there were more deserving causes. But I do think there are more deserving causes than the family of a man who earned £100,000 a year for his funeral costs. Yes.
Julia, I would imagine that just the same as me, you believe that what people do with their own money is their own business.
I wasn't banning people from giving money. £145,000 has been given.
If I may just finish, I assume that is the point of view that you have. And so I think to post something like, which was tantamount to saying, give your money to a more worthy cause, in your opinion, was getting into the business of how other people spend their money. I don't need you to tell me your opinion.
Well, then you didn't listen to it, so it didn't influence you.
I don't need you. Well, can you listen to me now? Because you have spoken for quite a while.
Good point.
I don't need you to tell me your opinion on how I spend my own money. We don't know anything about Jason Arday's family situation. We don't know what debts he was in. We don't know what his financial situation was. We've got an idea of what his salary may have been based on speculation, but I haven't seen his tax return. Have you? What I do know
there are grades that professors have, and we know what grade he was, and there's a pay structure relating to that.
What we do know, Julia, is that a family has lost their major breadwinner for the rest of that family's life, and I think it is normal in those circumstances for people to be charitable.
You don't want me to give my opinion on that, but you've just given me your opinion on that.
I didn't say I didn't want you to give your opinion.
You did.
I didn't say that.
I think you literally said I don't need your opinion.
I said I don't need your opinion.
No, exactly. But then, you didn't have to read it then. You didn't have to. You've given me. I didn't need your opinion, but I did.
You asked me on your show
to
get my opinion, didn't you? So you do want my opinion.
Well, I want my audience to hear your opinion. But your opinion won't affect what I think, because I've considered what I think, and I don't necessarily expect that my opinion should affect what you think. I was merely pointing out that given Jason Arday's book advance and any rumours about that and the likely advance he got, even if it was a fraction of what was rumoured and what was stated, we know from publishing sources that this is not a family that is in dire financial need. And I think I would go so far as to say I think borderline inappropriate to crowdfund in that scenario. I think it should be for needy causes. What do you make of the vigil that has been called for this evening? And there is talk, obviously, part of this fund is to go towards a memorial for Jason Arday. That is mentioned in the information about what that money will go to. Should there be a memorial to Jason Arday of any sort? Should there be a vigil for his life?
Well, to speak about what's appropriate, I think it's inappropriate. I thought your tweet was inappropriate and distasteful. But let's move on. I'll be going to the vigil later on. Does there need to be a memorial? That is up to the people who want to make a memorial or not. I'm not going to opine on that, but I will be going to the vigil later on. This man may well have done wrong, and this is something which I said to you last week. It's something I've written in the iPaper and also on Spiked Online and spoken to the media about. This man may have done wrong, but I think the intense scrutiny that his case attracted, I think, was disproportionate compared to other similar plagiarism cases that we have seen emerge from the university.
But it wasn't the same as there weren't any similar cases. That's the point. No other cases were of professors who were lauded by their universities.
You think the coverage was proportionate?
Yes, I do. No one else
was. It was proportionate?
Yes. No one else got a book deal. No one else was editing the Today programme. No one else was being hailed and treated as if he was the wunderkind in the same way. Other plagiarism cases, and the argument has been made by many online, it's a white-black thing.
When did you first come across Jason Arday's name?
Well, I wouldn't pay that much attention to a lot of the DEI stuff. When the plagiarism allegations were made, that was first, yes.
About a month ago or so?
But he had been in the news a lot. The guest editing at Radio 4 is done at Christmas. I'm abroad then.
You think that was a proportionate level of coverage?
He had been in numerous broadcasts.
But you and I hadn't heard of him until a month ago.
I haven't heard of everybody, no. I mean, I hold my hand up. I haven't heard of everybody.
I'm not saying you've heard of everyone. I'm just saying this guy was lauded so much that two people in the media who are in this day in, day out hadn't have heard of him since a month ago.
I probably don't spend as much time reading the BBC website and The Guardian as I should.
Wasn't it the Telegraph and the Times that broke it?
That broke the story of the plagiarism, yes, but hadn't been lauding him.
Right.
He didn't get the book advance because he was another professor at Cambridge University. He got that because he'd been lauded because of his amazing life. And it wasn't the story about Jason Arday, and the reason why he was it became such a big, and why this story was so big, was because it wasn't just some very dry story about whether or not his PhD had been lifted from somebody or not. It was about all of the fantastical claims that he'd made about his life, running the marathons, the money raised, the mute, being mute and autistic, and all of that. That was what made the story bigger, and all of those things were things that he chose to tell about himself. I didn't make any of those up. The media didn't make them up. He did.
Yes, he may well have made those things up. The conversation we're having is about whether or not the coverage has been proportionate. I don't think it has been. You think it has been. I don't think there's much more to add to that. We'll have to agree to disagree. Well,
and we can do so, exactly, and it's possible to have a conversation. No one's called anyone names. See, everyone, people are able to do that in this world. Albie, I really appreciate you joining us. Albie Amankona, writer and commentator. 11:49 is the time. I'm going to have to go to a break. We're so late. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk, Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. I lied to you. We're not going to get your calls in this half. I wanted to carry on that conversation with Albie Amankona to make sure we both had our full say. We will take your calls the next half hour. We're also going to be talking to Ian Duncan-Smith, a Conservative MP, former party leader, about what he makes of what reform have just announced, and we'll come back to that as well. Right now, let's turn our attention to what the hell is going on in the Middle East. Andrew Fox is a Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. He's a former Major in the Parachute Regiment as well. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Well, look, let's talk about, we've got Jared Kushner, he's the the US President's Middle East envoy, but he is also his son-in-law. He has arrived in Israel after a meeting with Hamas leaders talking about the Gaza peace plan. Desperate to say this Gaza peace plan, which Hamas have interestingly said they've accepted, but Netanyahu has said that he does not accept on behalf of Israel. What is going on, and what do you think will happen?
Well, how long have we got?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a pretty complex one to unpack, but let's try and look at the two sides really straightforwardly. The first thing to remember is that there is an election campaign in Israel ongoing at the moment. We're expected to see a variety of different domestic and international issues come into play, and of course Gaza will factor into that. Bibi was the man in the chair for 7th of October. There's a huge part of that failure lies at his door. He spent the last 2.5, nearly 3 years now trying to show that he's a strong war leader and that he can defeat Hamas and achieve all of his aims, and he really hasn't, unfortunately for him. And so, that will be factoring on the one side, and then on the Hamas side, we're seeing a desire for survival, to demonstrate their endurance to both the people of Gaza and the wider Arab world as part of the ongoing Palestinian cause. So it's very important for them that they don't look weak and disarmed. And then, of course, we've got the White House as the final factor here, who are keen to keep pushing their plans. They love a pointed plan, whether that be Ukraine, Gaza, or Iran. They love a point. And we rarely ever in these plans get past point 1, which is normally when the guns stop firing briefly. So that's where we are.
Thankfully, we did get past a couple of points on the Gaza peace plan, because we did see all the hostages returned, thankfully, including even some of the dead bodies. But what's fascinating is this reporting, and again, BBC classic, they say Hamas has agreed to these terms. Sorry, but the terms were very clear. First of all, that Hamas had to return all the bodies. They actually dragged their feet for a very long time about returning a number of hostages and indeed dead bodies, which were then easily found by IDF soldiers because they did know where they were all along. They just pretended they didn't. But also, they are supposed to be disarming. That's part of the deal. And Israel, with IDF forces, withdraw to a certain point. Hamas disarms, and then they withdraw further and further. Hamas is not disarmed. Hamas, let's be honest, has no intention of disarming. In which case, why on earth would Israel, why would any leader, forget Netanyahu, any leader of Israel, any leader of any sane leader of any country agree to keep a terrorist organisation on their doorstep who did what they did on October the 7th, who has vowed to do it every day if possible, if they can, armed and able to do that again? I mean, it's, on what planet would that be the next sensible thing for them to do?
Yeah, and we run into the eternal paradox of this ceasefire deal, is that it is contingent on Hamas's disarmament, and they are not going to disarm. And also, there's no real way to force them to disarm. 2.5 years of war didn't completely eradicate them from the battlefield. It's not going to. They're deeply embedded in every element of Gazan society. It's not just the combat troops, it's the justice ministry, it's the police force, it's the fire brigade, it's the guys who take the bins away. It's, this is the level of complete saturation of every element of Gazan life that Hamas has achieved. So you're not just going to winkle that out by bombing them. Look, Israel has made strides forward during this ceasefire period. It's not been really a ceasefire. Hamas have been shooting at Israel on what's known as the yellow line, which demarcates Israeli-held territory from Hamas territory. And then the Nili unit in Israel has been hunting relentlessly those who crossed the border on 7th of October. They have been taking assassination after assassination of those monsters.
Good.
So it's not, absolutely correct. And it's not been a ceasefire in the conventional sense, but it's now what you can, I think, strategically call an impasse. Hamas won't disarm, Israel won't withdraw, and it's the poor people of Palestine and Gaza who are stuck in the middle of this at the moment, whilst Donald Trump and Jared Kushner flail around looking for a solution to an impossible problem.
I suppose one could at least argue, think that Jared Kushner he's not going to sell out Israel. He himself is Jewish. He has played a very, surprisingly important and knowledgeable role in some of these talks.
Yeah, and of course he's the man behind the Abraham Accords, which saw Israel normalise relations with Arab states for the first time. So he does have some track record of success here, but I do suspect this is perhaps a bridge too far. I wrote, I think it was back in April 2024, that the best outcome here, I think, was a neutered Hamas and a good buffer zone between Gaza and Israel. I think I really stand by that assessment. That's the most likely and best outcome.
What's the most likely outcome in terms of our dealings with Russia? Because the reports today are suggesting Russia is building secret drone bases within striking distance of a heck of a lot of NATO territories in Eastern and even Central Europe. We've seen British built drones being used by Ukraine and landing in Russian territory for the first time. A lot of people are very concerned that this is gradually ratcheting up to what could eventually be a European war.
There is a clear route to escalation there. That is the path that we really do need to avoid. That's obviously easier said than done. Escalation in conflict is usually something that happens unintentionally rather than by design. And as we've seen in Iran, that escalatory ladder is a very easy one to climb and a very difficult one to climb down. The important thing, I think, is that Russia generally play below the threshold of war when it comes to NATO. And I think NATO, yes, is heavily weakened after America has essentially withdrawn from it, to all intents and purposes. But we still have a very effective set of troops and aircraft and naval vessels within NATO European members. The command and control structure probably isn't as easy as if the Americans were still playing. But, we do have a very capable, when we bring it all together, a very capable force. And Russia generally operates at acts below the threshold of all-out war because they know that an attack on one will be an attack on all. Yeah. That's why we see these misguided drones who crash land in Romania or Poland. It's deniable. Right.
Okay. And good to know. Andrew, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to leave it there. Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. I know we've got very little from Claire Pierce. We'll get more from her in the next hour. Get to your calls as well. Ian Duncan-Smith up after the news as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. You're with Talk. We're on DAB Plus Radio. We're also on YouTube, but you can watching or listening. Absolutely fantastic to have you company. I know we've got a particular group of people who are very, very excited about what I'm saying, very interested in what I'm saying today on the show, and I hope you are very much enjoying today's output. And it's, you know, matching all your expectations. Anyway, it's 2 minutes past midday. As I say, it's great to have your company. If you do miss anything from the show, if you missed anything from the last 2 hours, we're not putting out as many tweets as we normally do today. So if you do want to go back and see the very, very, very measured, sensible and completely correct commentary that we've been giving on various big stories, do go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe so you never have to miss a thing. Coming up, we are going to be discussing what Reform UK have said, what they'll do if they win power in terms of welfare benefits. In particular, not just what we heard at the weekend, which was that they were going to save 50 billion quid pretty much by abolishing PIP, person dependence payments, from an awful lot of people who've got no right to get them. Something like 2.8 million people. Yeah, you ain't going to be getting those anymore. 2+ million who really do need that help will be getting help, and will be getting, hopefully, more help, because it'll really, really make improve their lives. But if you are a foreign national, nope. You are not going to be entitled to any more benefits of any kind, whether it's housing benefit, whether it's universal credit, whether it's disability benefit, whether it's child benefit, pension tax credit. Nope, you're not entitled to any of it because you're not British, and this is welfare in Britain for British people. Crucially, also, we had announced today, this was the new announcement about 11:15 today by Robert Jenrick, the party's Treasury spokesman, that work-fit Brits claiming universal credit for more than a year, and there are some 330,000 of those, will be required to do 20 hours of work a week for their local council. Sweeping the streets, gardening, or in a library. I've got a full list of things they can help do, and we'll be talking about all of that with Sir Ian Douglas-Smith up next. Also going to be joined by the former police officer Stephen Gray. We've seen the most extraordinary resurrection of blasphemy law in this country. We've seen that, you know, effectively happening anyway. But he has been convicted for resharing online posts that were jokes critical of Islam. I think if they were critical of Christianity, for funny feeling, he wouldn't have a conviction. He, of course, is being helped by the Free Speech Union, and we'll be talking to him about his appeal. Plus, we're going to talk about water companies being able to charge consumers higher prices during droughts under plans being considered by Ofwat. Water rationing is what we used to call that. Water rationing, because that seems reasonable, doesn't it? Anyway, we'll talk about all of that. Joining me, I'm delighted to say, for the whole show is Claire Pearsall, former Conservative Government Advisor. But we haven't had much of a chance to talk to you in the last hour. We had a long session with Robert Jenrick from the press conference, and when we haven't managed to get to more calls. We will get to more calls. Give us a call on anything you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. Trying to say that as quickly as possible. Claire, where do we even start? Do you want to come back in on the reform announcement? Because you're a Conservative, but a lot I'm thinking, I was watching your face during Robert Jenrick's speech, I'm thinking you don't disagree with this, you don't disagree with this. Labour have said, very few foreigners claim benefits anyway. I'm like, one is too many. Yeah. But will the question become whether the savings are what they really are, or will the question come, will they be able to do it? And is it actually feasible?
I think it's a mixture of that. I think that we need to understand where those figures have come from, because as a headline figure, it sounds great, and as you could say, probably could go further. But where has it come from? So I think that,
we know that Danny Kruger, who was a Conservative until really not, a blink of an eye ago, who is a big thinker. Does the tech, we know he's been working on a lot of these things. Yeah. He's been doing a bit of a media round this morning.
And that's absolutely fine.
My guess is he will have done the numbers, crunched the numbers rather more detailed fashion than... He's kind of think tanky kind of person.
Yeah, he is. So there is that. There is, are they going to get into power to actually continue with their plan?
Polls not looking like that right now.
No, and the election is not tomorrow, so we have to be mindful of that. So there's a number of different things. Is it going to be practical to, for example, to get councils to take on people to do 20 hours of sort of basic community service? I'm not saying that I don't like the plans, but you need to have a look at how you carry it out and what are the workarounds that you've got. And as I said, there are problems with the Dutch system which need looking at for this country.
They cut their welfare, the dependency on disability benefit and the like, by 40%.
But small businesses were finding that incredibly difficult, so therefore they weren't taking people on. Yeah. And if we already have that problem,
I think it's businesses over 5 employees, and then people will go, well, I won't expand them. There's no point. I've got a load of responsibility here. Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's talk about all of this with Sir Ian Dougsmith, MP, of course, for the Conservatives, former Conservative Party, and crucially also former Work and Pension Secretary. He was the man who introduced universal credit, which my recollection, Sir Ian, as a political editor at the time, was that you were slammed day in, day out by Labour for universal credit, by everyone on the left, quite a few on the right as well. And of course, and then they decided they fully supported it when it did actually work rather well.
Yeah, the universal credit is a mechanism. It's the policy that goes into it that changes with political parties. And the reality is that it was made far too wide during COVID. And in fact, it was abandoned at one point during COVID because they introduced all these new policies like furlough scheme and stuff, which I did warn the government at the time, do not take anybody out of universal credit. Do everything through universal credit because it's tried and tested, and also it checks everybody and keep the face.
I've got a friend who was working the benefit system at the time. Everything was on the phone or the computer. Nothing was checked. I mean, there were. I would be surprised if it wasn't in the hundreds of thousands, but definitely tens of thousands of people who were they were literally phone banks of organised criminals having people sign on and claiming.
That's been going on for years, and actually during COVID, all these other systems were massively defrauded, So the lesson really from that was, don't throw money at a problem like this. When you have a problem when companies are going to take them out of work, just drop them down onto low or no income, and then you pick them back up when they go back into work. So that would have been simpler. On the reform stuff, which I guess you really want to...
Yes, I do.
Yeah, these ideas, for the most part, have been worked on by the Centre for Social Justice. They already did previous ones.
And that's a think tank that you set up, yeah?
Yeah, I set it up. It looks at welfare. It looks at helping people change their lives to get out of poverty, not just throw money at them. And it's really the most powerful voice in this space. So I know for a fact that the CSJ has been working on this. It worked on a whole load of stuff which came out a year ago, and the Conservative Party, as a result of that, picked that up, and that would save around about 23 billion, we estimate. But these figures are yet not tried and tested. And so my concern about reform launching this like this is the CSJ has not completed their work on this, and this is very much a bit ad hoc. Yeah, they're claiming, for example, over the weekend, they claimed 50 billion.
In total, yeah.
I had a look at that and I thought, no, that is not.
I mean, nothing the governments do. Most things the government do cost more, and most things they try to save, they don't save anything like it.
But I saved 25 billion a year out of the welfare budget until they hit COVID.
Yeah.
So the first and only time it's been cut by that degree.
Yeah.
And I suffered, as you were right, all the flack and everything else from people. But we got more people back to work, 1 million more people back to work as a result.
Which is very, very good for people in many different ways, not just the taxpayer.
Work is the solution to depression, anxiety.
But let's talk about this, because a lot of people saying we've already had Labour criticising it, and I'm sure there'll be holes in the numbers. There always are in everyone's policies, no matter who's been looking at them. And then also, you know, people have a funny way of responding to incentives in a way that's not predicted by the policy wonks at think tanks, no matter how good they are. But the reality is, people say, well, you know, I don't know if this is doable. You know, the reality is, what is definitely not doable is continuing to have a ballooning welfare state where millions of people who could be working are not working and not even required to work. So let's just go through, first of all, do you agree, first of all, that was what was announced in the papers yesterday, that Generic, if they were in power, if Reform were in power, they would basically abolish PIP effectively for anyone with any minor claims. There'll be in-person reviews. It's all been on computer or on the phone in about the last 6 years. And they reckon that more than half, some 2.8 million people, would lose benefits altogether. Do you think that that is desirable and or possible?
Well, first of all, it's an ambition, and it's not yet a worked-up policy. So, of course, you want fewer people to claim PIP. PIP is to sustain people's difficulties. It's not a work benefit. So, in other words, they get it if they simply need to have equipment, they need to be helped to get around, or they need help when they're in the home. So that's what it's aimed at. The biggest problem for PIP, as in many others, is the massive growth in mental health claims. And mental health claims have driven this expansion dramatically, and it's that target area that you need to look at. Just going across the board and saying you're going to cancel this, you will end up coming back to how do you then give people support? And then you're back into the, well, we won't quite cut this, we won't do this, we might do this. So the detail of this, and I can promise you, I know this firsthand.
Yeah.
The detail, when you get into welfare change, you have to have thought through all of the steps that you're going to take. Otherwise, this just becomes a gash moment, and then suddenly it all collapses in on you. And the biggest problem is just getting rid of that benefit as it stands. Then you're going to say, well, what about those who are genuinely and seriously ill? And then they're going to say, well, we'll provide that for that. But who decides that? And
well, Reform was saying clinicians. It wouldn't be, you know, computer says no, sitting at home, working from home, to get an actual clinician. That's what they're saying.
No, but that's the point I make. Now, all of a sudden, what happens? Once you get clinicians involved, they, of course, don't like to be put on the spot by people who claim that they're not well. So, you know, they're the biggest ones to wave people through on depression.
GPs we've seen. But also a lot of people have someone who's got, you know, a disease that is clearly not going to change, or disabilities are not going to change. You know, why should they be reassessed every 5 minutes? It's crazy. But there are also people whose disability affects them differently every day. So, you know, on a Monday you can see them and they can walk and be fine. And on a Thursday, actually be completely debilitated. And these are genuine illnesses and diseases.
And that is the complication straight away. And the other big complication, which they're not dealing with, which I would recommend that they take a deep breath and ask this question. The biggest problem that we have always faced is the appeal process, because everybody appeals immediately. They then we've introduced a review at the department level, and then they said, no, you can't have the benefit. Then they appealed again, and they ended up appealing to judges. And the final tribunal is a judge-led tribunal. And in about 80% of the cases, they find in favor of the plaintiff.
Does that mean the original decision was wrong?
Well, they all then say, no, we're reversing the original decision. So, if you are claiming something and you may not be really eligible for it, and you just go through the process of appealing, there's a better than evens chance that you're going to get your benefit.
Or would the argument be that actually they have those decisions were wrong, and those are the people that push it because they really need it and really deserve it, and that's why the judges make... I mean, I'm being generous to the judges,
I don't believe so. Not on the scale of the overturning. Everybody appeals. Everybody.
Okay, right, okay.
So straight away, what you're ending up with is a massive problem at the other end.
Yeah.
DWP tearing their hair out over this because they've said no.
And it all costs a fortune
and
as
then
well.
They get it back. So that bit,
okay.
And then you're going to say, well, how do you not do that? Because they have a right to the appeal. So straight away, this is the biggest backdoor into the benefits that I can recall, and caused us endless...
But there needs to be an appeals process, obviously.
Well, exactly my point. So now you have to argue, what will you do with that? So my point, all I'm saying about this, is very easy to come up with a lot of, we're going to get rid of this, we're going to smash that, we're going to change that, all done, not a problem.
Yeah.
My answer is, I've lived and breathed.
Yes, you've been.
You save 25 billion a year by making sure the ducks lined up, not that you made...
Let's also talk about saying that his announcement in the papers today from Robert Jenrick that foreigners will not be entitled to claim any benefits. Housing benefit, pension tax credit, sickness benefit, they're not going to be entitled to anything. Do you think that they're not a British citizen? What would you say to that?
I have no problems with the principle of that. Then you're into, well, hang on a second, that's fine. But what if they're living with someone? What if they're married to somebody and they're definitely still a foreigner, but they've married somebody who's a British citizen and they haven't chosen to become a British citizen? You've got complications.
Isn't that their choice at that point?
Yeah, but these things then are another set of complications. All I'm saying is these principles, which were CSJ principles, the Centre for Social Justice, who are still working this up right now. So the detail of that, when we publish, will be clearer than reforms given. All I say is it's easy to make these big statements, but the proof of this lies in the very complicated detail about what happened. Just like, for example, the contributory principle.
Yeah.
They said, oh, well, it'll be all right if you've contributed towards your pension. But in truth, the contributory principle is wider than the pension. It's into the benefit system as well. You get a separate rate as being a contributor who's worked and then fallen out of work. You get that chance to have a different rate. And so straight away, well, are you going to get rid of that altogether? Because that was what people believed. They used to call their stamp, if you recall. And that's what they believed they were getting. So it wasn't just a pension. The truth is, the contribution doesn't even pay for the pension. Let alone any of the other benefits. But the key question is it's locked to them in legal terms. Yep. So all I'm saying is, this takes a bit of working out.
Absolutely. Finally, let me ask you about the workfare aspect. The people being expected 330,000 able-bodied, able-minded people who were basically they're not signed off on PIP. They're required to be looking for work, but after a year have not found work. Basically being required to turn up for 20 hours a week working at the local council. I mean, I can think of a lot of Tory voters in your constituency who go out to work every day, do the right thing, who would be very much in favour of that.
Yeah, but plenty of favour of people working, getting the work habit, making sure they know what getting up in the morning is all about and going off to take responsibility for something. The question really is, though, how do you get the councils to do all of that and who's paying them in the end, the councils, that is, to make sure they've got people to make sure that work is being done. So in principle, again, like everything else, not a bad idea. It's exactly what the CSJ has been looking at.
Okay.
My point is, they're still working up some of the figures.
Got a lot of mentions of the CSJ today, certainly.
Well, they're the ones that are behind so much of this.
And I know they've been doing some very, very interesting work for a number of years on this. It does seem to me, though, and I think a lot of my audience think this as well, which is actually Reform and the Tories, a lot of the time you are on the same page on a lot of the things that you want to tackle. I mean, things like, got net zero. Apparently Andy Burnham's minded to approve the North Sea gas field. That'd be something that, of course he should. He's crazy if he doesn't do it. His Labour backbenchers will go crazy. But it'll be cheered on by both the Tories and Reform for doing so, and indeed any voter who cares at all about the future of the economy of this country. On welfare, on immigration, I mean, on so many issues, you're on the same page. Is it time for everyone to bury the hatchet?
Well, I think that people like to bury the hatchet in each other's heads, sometimes. If that helps at all, I don't know. But I think the reality is that we have to change the way welfare works. That's what I set out to do when I became Secretary of State, and I promise you, the attacks you face from the left on this is astonishing when you do it, but you have to plow through. We did save significant monies and we reformed it. But again, as I keep coming back to it, I'm all in favour of lots of the stuff that's announced because I've been working with it at the Centre for Social Justice. The reality is, though, just making sure that this lines up and that you don't make an announcement about something which you simply can't deliver. Because all you do is raise expectations and then you hack people off when they say, oh, well, you didn't do this and you didn't deliver it. And the answer is, make sure we've got it right. As they say, speak softly but carry the big stick. Make sure that you don't over-talk it, but what you do is over-deliver it.
Yeah, quite. Well, let me ask you about one other story that's been dominating the news, certainly online, in the last few days, in the last few weeks, in terms of the exposés about the various lies of Jason Arday, the Cambridge professor who resigned. Took his own life on Friday. That news emerged on Friday evening. There's been an explosion of commentary about this, largely, again, you can say left or right, but largely from the left, accusing the media, the right, of a racist, basic hounding of this man to his death. On the right, accusations that DEI has basically created this man and put him in a position where he could have had so far to fall and chose to take his own life. This morning, Lord Chris Smith, the former Labour cabinet minister, will remember him. He's now Chancellor of Cambridge University, has been for some time. He criticised what he called the racist feeding frenzy around Jason Arday. And he said academic integrity could be upheld whilst questioning the treatment of Jason Arday. Of course, Cambridge University is one that employed him without doing, many would argue, the most basic due diligence on his qualifications and his past. What's your response to all of that?
Well, first of all, this is a personal tragedy. It's a personal tragedy which will be haunting his family, and it's really, really awful. No matter which way you cut this, who's to blame, not to blame, this ghastly and terrible suicide will have repercussions internally for those who love him and those who have grown up with him and his friends, etc. So that is the number one fact. But when it comes down to the way this is done, of course, the media went after this. But then again, the media went after this because the facts were there. What are they supposed to do? Sit back and turn a blind eye to facts and issues surrounding competence and eligibility? I actually personally think that Cambridge have a lot to answer for here because, first of all, they spent their whole time in denial. And the problem is when you're in denial, you just create the greater feeding frenzy that they were complaining about. Instead of coming forward to this and saying, yes, okay, well, let's have a good look at this and let's undertake a review. And there's nothing more to be said about it until we complete the review, but we'll take sort of evidence from everywhere else. But their delay in all of that and their failure to do it, I think, has some measure of blame to be attached to it. And for those who go around screaming racism, etc., I think that doesn't help anybody anywhere. At the end of the day, this is about capability and about whether somebody should be employed in the job that they're meant to do and whether they were capable.
The argument we've heard again and again is that there was only such a coverage of him in media because he was black. It was only because he was black, and there were other professors who've been criticised or accused of plagiarism, even sacked for it, and it's not been a big story.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't think that this is racist. It's too easy a charge to make. I think that there are lots and lots of people of colour and of different creeds who do very well in universities, who come and they teach, and they are brilliant. This is not about a blanket attack on anybody who happens to be black, who happens to be a lecturer at a university, particularly a top one. This is about credibility and whether or not your qualifications for that job suit and fit the title that you are given, and whether or not the classes you teach are fundamentally correct and right. And, there's been some complaints from students
who were
well.
accused of racism.
So, you know, everywhere we go, it's racism. But when you do that, you stop the natural process of asking the questions, what happened, why, and what could we do to make sure this never happens again in the future? That's surely the way to go, and keep calm about it rather than screaming at each other.
So Ian Duncan-Smith, always good to talk to you, Conservative MP, former Conservative Party leader. Thank you very much indeed. Claire Pissell, would you want to come back in on, I mean, a lot of talk about the Centre for Social Justice, also conversations on Jason Arde, whatever you'd like to come back in on.
Yeah, I think Ian Duncan-Smith makes a really good point that the facts were out there in the case of Jason Arde, and are you expected to never mention it, never look at it?
I think that is the argument, yes.
And I find that so frightening that we cannot now comment on a case that has the public interest.
The Good Law Project, Jolyon Morton, they're the people who got the petition, like 17,000 people signed, great the good, many figures, politicians, media, who basically calling it was a racist witch hunt against Jason Arde when this story first emerged into the public domain. And they have since now got a petition for there to be a public inquiry into the media coverage of this. That is nothing short of an attempt to censor the media, is it not?
Well,
as was indeed calling the police on journalists who...
And interestingly, when Sir Mark Rowley was questioned about the police's action, he did say that they had taken their eye off the ball.
Which is
when
not
they were...
a justification.
Absolutely isn't, which I think actually made it worse. And they knew precisely what they were doing. So the whole sorry saga has been dealt with so appallingly. And the people that are getting blamed and hounded are now those who were pointing at it saying something isn't right here. It's nothing to do with the race of the individual. It's to do with all of the facts that we knew that were out there that had been revealed by a journalist, and now we're being told you shouldn't even be looking.
The idea also that all the information that had been made Jason Arde such a figure. And again, our guest, Albie Amenkona, pointing out, were you aware of him before? Like, well, no, but I'm not aware of everybody. But, you only have to look at the cuttings to go, oh, my God, this guy has been on telly a lot. And I probably don't watch the sort of shows which are having a discussion with a Cambridge professor involved in sociology of education. That's not really an area of interest of mine. But the interesting thing there is just the idea that the idea this is equivalent to another professor who happens to be white, who wasn't a big story, but who also probably didn't claim to have run 30 marathons in 35 days, to be mute to the age of 11 and illiterate to the age of 18, and had raised £5.5 million for charity, had a brain tumour before his survivor, and had a $1.4 million reputed book deal. I mean. Those aren't the same things.
Yeah, and it is very different.
Indeed. 12:26 is the time. Your thoughts on that? Your thoughts on reforms and their announcement today? I mean, there's a lot in what Reform have had to say. Interesting to have Ian Duncan-Smith on as a former Tory, basically welfare expert and minister, talking about the reform policy. Some of it, he says, basically doesn't work, but I got the impression he agreed with the principles. The question is how much is achievable on all these things. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 12:29 is the time. Coming up in just a few moments, we're going to be talking to a retired police officer, Stephen Gray. He has been convicted, well, to all intents and purposes, of, they didn't call it that in court, but of blasphemy, which is weird because we don't have a blasphemy law in this country. He passed on some social media posts which were basically satirical jokes, comments about Islam. I wonder if he'd got the same conviction if he'd posted them about Christianity. We'll talk with him in the studio in just a few moments. First up, let's get to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Herbie is on the line. He's in Harrow. Herbie, you want to talk about Robert Jenrick's announcements on welfare reform, don't you?
Well, certainly do. I mean, say the problem is unless we do something very soon, Julia, we are definitely going to go bust. We can't carry on at this rate. It's not possible. We cannot keep on supporting those who do not want to work. It's a bit like the illegal immigrants, supporting them every minute of the day. We can't do it. Look, if you want to pay this money out and you're prepared to pay it, then so be it. But we're not prepared to pay it. People are working, can't pay their bills, can't enjoy holidays, while people that are on benefits are having holidays, they've got mobility allowances, they've got this, they've got that. Where do you think it's fair on society? It's not.
And this is the fascinating thing. But as soon as anyone talks about doing this, whether it was the Keir Starmer, the last Labour Prime Minister, or whether it's Tories or Reform, anyone else, everyone immediately goes, but what about the people who are severely disabled? You will then immediately have someone in a wheelchair with multiple sclerosis or something as this. I'm worried I'm going to lose my benefits. Now, we're told, and I look, there will be mistakes. There are mistakes made in every system. There are people right now who don't get benefits who should, and people who get them who shouldn't. But there will be, there will be politicians who panic and then say, oh, we can't do this because everyone's going to call us nasty. But and you're right, we haven't got a choice.
Yeah, Julie, look, there are people that are swinging a leg. We know that. There's enough of them out there. Exactly. But it's costing you and I unsustainable amounts of money, which will carry on. And it's only going to get worse unless somebody says, stop, this is it. We have now got to reform the situation. We've got to reform this benefit system completely from top to bottom, clear the decks and then bring it back and implement what is required and what is needed to help those who do need it.
Yeah,
simple as that.
And there are people who genuinely do, and and they need it. They often need more than they're getting to have a decent life. And I'd be very happy for some of the savings to go towards that. What do you make of things like the workfare? I mean, we've basically got. I mean, I've got the list of what people would be a reform government would you require. Welfare to work scheme. They reckon that will save taxpayers more than $1 billion a year because people basically will go back to work. But basically, tasks like working in the town centre, beautifying, maintaining parks, open spaces, burial grounds, restoring local highways, maintaining council house stocks if you've got any skills there, helping in libraries, helping adult social care provision, and things like that. I mean, does that sound like a good idea?
Julie, it's perfect. Look, I took an apprenticeship out when I started work, and I certainly became a tradesman and electrician by trade and everything else. The problem is that AI is taking over some of the problems or some of the working places now. We need people that the infrastructure needs, plumbers, bricklayers, painters, decorators. It's always going to be needed. We need to get these people to go in and get these jobs. Forget about being a programmer earning 50, 60, 70,000 pounds. Get a job, enjoy the job, be proud to know you've done something for the nation, for the people, for your neighbour, for your whatever, for society. It's as simple as that. That's all it's needed. We're not asking you to work,
I think if you've been unemployed for a year, I think this would be good for people. I really do, to get you back out. Herbie, great call. Thank you very much. Let's go to Nick, who is in London. Hello, Nick. What do you want to say?
Hello, Julia. Hello. I enjoyed Jenrick's speech. There was a lot in there I liked, but the big but is getting the establishment and Blob and Lib councils coming along and joining in on this. You can hear the squeals now from the offended lefties about they can't do this and they can't do that. And so any plan, any government comes in and does, the first thing they must do, work out how to get the civil service to do what they're asked. And that, I would suggest, starts with come to work. Don't work from home.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. But no, but also there is another thing. Apparently there is some legislation they need to change. That needs to be day one legislation, basically, because they need to change the law. So civil servants report to the ministers, not to the permanent secretaries, for instance. So, you know, you're told what to do and you do it. If you don't like it, you've got no business working in the civil service.
Exactly. I mean, Ian Duncan Smith was saying about appeals against benefit decisions. A judge decides on that. Why? A judge shouldn't decide on that because a judge doesn't face re-election.
Unaccountable, certainly in our system. Nick, great call, both great calls. Thank you so much. Glad we got you on. 12:34 is the time. Up next, we'll be talking to retired police officer Stephen Gray about why. Well, we basically do have blasphemy laws in this country. He's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. Great to have your company. 12:36 is the time. Great to have the company of my next guest in the studio, who's a retired police officer, Stephen Gray. A very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you.
Great to have you in the studio, although it's very sad we've got you in the studio because you were a police officer. You served almost 30 years in Cleveland Police. You've been on trial and have been convicted of a crime, which I imagine is a bit of a shock to you as a police officer whose job was to uphold the law for many years. And very interestingly, although officially your crime is not blasphemy, it is blasphemy, isn't it? What were you charged with and what was it claimed that you had done?
Well, I reposted something on Facebook.
How very dare you.
I know, so I didn't make this post myself, but I thought it was quite funny. So I reposted it, and that's all it was. It was a post that somebody else had made. It's been reposted over 1,000 times on Twitter and other sites.
Were other people questioned by the police over this?
When I asked the Crown Prosecution Service that, this is we're only here to deal with you. And
right. Well, let's tell people, because often I find these conversations and I see them all in the media, and no one at any point actually says what it is that you've done. Now, there were two posts they were not happy with, but you actually only convicted over on one of them.
That's correct.
The one you were charged with but not convicted of is an image of basically an image of a Middle Eastern man which said, "Time for mass deportation and children in need." And the caption read, 12-year-old Mohammed recently arrived at Dover, Please donate to help him move from a 3-star to a 5-star hotel, which has a better halal menu, free Wi-Fi and Sky, and is nearer to a girls' school. You were not convicted of that. Was considered to be acceptable political comment, basically. Yes. The other image showed a man in a turban alongside a rasher of bacon. And what it says alongside it is, fun facts about bacon. People who eat bacon have a lower chance of marrying a 9-year-old girl. Now, that is clearly a reference to Prophet Muhammad and what is in all of the Islamic religious texts about him marrying a young his wife was one of his wives was very, very young.
Yes.
And that the marriage was consummated at the age of 9.
Yes.
Something which would be obviously very shocking in our day and age, but by all accounts not at that time. Who knows? So you were convicted of that. So on what were you found? Because you were found guilty of making a grossly offensive post on Facebook. It's grossly offensive. What was your defence?
My defence was, in both of the charges, it's just a humorous way to shine light on a problem which is still going on. There's still child marriages going on right around the world and in countries that we actually give aid to. And I think it's deplorable. All right, it might upset somebody, it might be in bad taste, but I don't really care about that. I think the message it puts out about child marriage is more important.
And in many cases in the countries where that is still happening, where girls are just, given over to a cousin, or if I remember, Afghanistan, in many other, Pakistan, other countries, this is done, and it's not considered unacceptable because in the teachings in Islam of what the Prophet Muhammad had done, that this would not be something that would be... Now, there'll be many Muslims who say this is totally unacceptable in this day and age, and I feel the need to put that point. But to all intents and purposes, I'm thinking, if you had made a similar equivalent posting, satirical, political comment, joke, whatever we want to call it, about Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, Judaism, do you think you'd have felt, had your collar felt by the police?
Not a chance, no, not a chance. If I'd taken the mickey out of, say, the Catholic priesthood, with the child abuse, would I have been arrested, or would I have been interviewed under caution and ended up in court with a conviction? I don't think there was any chance.
You'd have had a series on Channel 4 by now. Oh, no, you would have, because that's totally acceptable, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. It just seems for Islam. We only have blasphemy laws for Islam,
and we've seen
I
this.
feel.
We've seen this again and again, haven't we? And we saw this with the Kushkin case, and I know you're being represented by the Free Speech Union, of which I'm a member, but I'm also on a committee.
Absolutely fantastic.
Fighting against the blasphemy law by the back door. We had an MP, a Labour backbencher, asking Keir Starmer when he was Prime Minister in PMQs about basically effectively having a law, for all intents and purposes, a blasphemy law, criticism of Islam, that should be a criminal offence. And he certainly didn't say, no, absolutely not, we live in a country with free speech.
Yes.
We did used to have blasphemy laws, and we did have a lot of people who were very upset by things like, I know this is formative for my generation, imagine for you similarly, Life of Brian.
Oh, yes.
We're around the same age, and, and lots of people are absolutely horrified by this, but, it wasn't banned because we didn't have a blasphemy law.
Exactly. So it just seems as though they're trying to put a blasphemy law just for Islam through the back door, and I think it's a dangerous situation we find ourselves in. Very dangerous.
What about people who say, "Oh, you're just Islamic, you're Islamophobic, you just hate Muslims, you're racist, you're a bigot, you need to be called out for this"? What do you say to that, Stephen?
I don't hate Muslims. I have a fear of Islam, but it's not a phobia.
Phobia is an irrational fear.
Irrational, exactly. I don't think if you have a fear of Islam, I don't think it's a phobia.
What is your fear of Islam?
The influence they're having on our society. And we just turned a blind eye to things like halal slaughter, and we've seen the grooming gangs, things like that. It puts a fear inside me. We need to stop it, we need to fight it, and...
there's certainly been issues over two-tier policing involved in this issue. We've also, of course, got the Batley Grammar School teacher who, to this day, interestingly, no vigil for him. I haven't seen a vigil for him. It's not one in Trafalgar Square tonight at 6 o'clock, but someone hounded, not just out of a job, but out of literally for fear for his life and his wife and children, hounded out of his home to a different identity. Yes. Still in hiding. Is it 5 years later now? Local MPs never even said his name, as far as I can remember. Yeah. And that was simply for showing a cartoon, to explain what had happened in the in the Charlie Hebdo case and to discuss that issue. That wouldn't have happened with any other religion.
No, I agree. I agree 100%.
Do you think, though, that we need to have perhaps a more nuanced debate about Islam rather than, some would say, is posting a politically satirical, jokey post or reposting it, is that a helpful contribution, someone would ask? What would you say to that?
Well, it could, but the way the system's working at the moment, with the government we have in at the moment, I just don't think they're interested in talking about it. Not interested at all. You know, we should have common law to cover everybody. We don't need Sharia law coming in the back door, things like that. Mm-hmm. This is Britain. British laws, British values.
You were already retired as a police officer. Yes. You and your wife, though, you foster a very young girl. You've had her for, I think, 6 years.
6 years, yes.
You were concerned particularly with a criminal conviction, whether that would impact, because you obviously have to declare, you have to get those DBS checks.
Yeah.
You know,
it's an enhanced DBS check.
Because you've got a vulnerable child in your home.
Yes.
Of course, as a former police officer, you know, great, this is someone, upstanding member of the community. Yeah. But you were very concerned that you might lose that girl and she would go back into the foster system.
Yes, that's a fear I had. But from day one, I've been open and honest with our social worker, the child social worker, and they've been quite supportive, because the first person who actually read the charges, they couldn't believe it. You know, a social worker just says, this is rubbish.
This is what you've done.
Yeah, it's just, they've been very supportive anyway.
And you've also had, you say, the support of the Free Speech Union. You are appealing this conviction. How long will that take? What's the process? My solicitor put the appeal in a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, sorry, and that will be going ahead in November at Teesside Crown Court. But this has been hanging over you for quite some time, hasn't it?
Early 2025, yes, it's all started, because I was charged.
18 months ago.
Yeah, and I got a phone call from my lawyer saying a senior CPS lawyer has looked at this, and he said there's no evidence, and that was it, finished.
Yeah.
And the complainant, a male known to me, appealed that decision.
It's been reported that it's actually a neighbour of yours.
It's a neighbour that we've been in dispute with.
With whom you've had a dispute, but a lot of people do over other issues, and that he appealed and said that you should be, and the CPS decided.
CPS.
Which is very strange, because either there is or there isn't enough of a situation.
And when my neighbour turned up at the trial, the judge sent him away because he said it's a victimless crime, which baffled me. I don't know if it's a victimless crime.
But it was still a crime.
Yes, it was still a crime. And
what is your penalty for this?
With costs and fines and levies, it was £1,100 I had to pay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And have you paid that, or did that?
Yes, I paid it straight away.
And now you're appealing. And Free Speech Union having to fund that.
Oh, the Free Speech Union have been fantastic. They've started crowdfunding off. Mm-hmm. And they said it's going really well.
I would say that's a deserving cause.
Yes, and the support from the Free Speech Union has been fantastic. You know,
they have a very good track record. They have won an awful lot of these cases.
Free speech doesn't look after itself.
The thing about free speech, again, you remember there were cases, obviously, the pug dog that was doing the Nazi salute and things like that. There are things like Hamid Kashkan burning the Quran and things. You know, again, himself, he left Islam himself and fled Turkey because he couldn't have religious freedom. And he was making a very clear political point. A lot of us might say, you know what? I wouldn't burn a book. I wouldn't draw a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad if that would offend someone. I wouldn't perhaps post that social media post. But they would say, as I would, but I defend other people's right to do so in a free country. How important is freedom of speech and freedom to criticise, not to personally attack an individual person of a particular faith?
I agree, yes. I think it's very important.
But to criticise a religion and religious teachings and religious points of view.
Yes.
Of any
I think that's what our whole British system is based upon, being open, being allowed to criticise, being able to offend people. Mock, yes. But not to the point where you're picking on one person and it becomes very personal. This post I made wasn't directed at anybody, it was just out for general. So it's not as if I was trying to get at any one person, anybody. Yes, it was just, and I think we've got to protect that. People might not like it, but they don't have to read it. They don't have to watch certain
programs. They don't
have
to agree with it.
They don't have to read a paper if they don't like what's in that newspaper. But we have to have the freedom to express ourselves, and the freedom of speech is so important.
Stephen Gray, retired police officer, convicted of making a grossly offensive post on Facebook. Very much wish you luck in your bid to overturn that outrageous conviction. Stephen Gray, thank you. 12:48 is the time. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 12:50 is the time. Claire Pistol's back in the studio, and we're going to get her thoughts on what my next guest has to say. And this is, well, ongoing heat wave. It's kind of ending today, isn't it? And then we're going on, but there's going to be a sixth heat wave. Meanwhile, we've got water companies apparently going to be allowed to charge us more in droughts with surge pricing. Sounds horribly like water rationing to me. But apparently we might have some good news from Andy Burnham. He might be allowed, well, basically about to sort of approve new oil and gas fields in the North Sea. Let's talk about all of this with Ross Clark, author of Not Zero, how an irrational target will impoverish you, help China, and won't even save the planet. Good morning to you. So good afternoon to you, Ross.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Can we talk first of all about the water companies? I was stunned by this because this is very similar to the whole, because we're going to have electricity surge pricing, which means you can use your dishwasher and your washing machine overnight. Isn't that great? Cheaper. What they mean is it's going to be too pricey to do it at the convenient time you wanted to do it. We're basically about to get the same with water companies, aren't we?
Yes, this is the water industry has been pushing for the right to charge extra during the summer months, and well, there already is a pilot scheme. It's not a compulsory one, but it's you can voluntarily join it. For South West Water, you get sort of slightly cheaper water in the winter, but you get more expensive water in the summer.
I guess if you don't have a swimming pool, which most of us don't, then you think, oh, that might be a good deal, but again,
you might do, but
the idea is it's more expensive in the summer, so you'll use less. But this is part of this idea I hadn't realised until I read this over the weekend. There is actually a government policy, and water companies are supposed to push it, for us to use 20% less water than we previously used.
Yes, exactly. This is what's behind it, is the water companies trying to drive down water usage rather than invest in infrastructure to supply us with water properly.
Well, how are we supposed to use less water than we did in the 90s when there were 11 million more people?
Well, exactly. It's difficult. You can take a shower instead of a bath. I suppose you can have a water butt to water your garden rather than... this is that whole idea that a water industry should discourage us from using
their product.
Can you imagine if Tesco, for example, had a policy, well, we're all going to make you buy 20% less food in future.
Yeah.
With supermarkets.
Well, the government has been imposing that by deciding what we can and can't see at the tills or at the end of aisles. I mean, it is utterly bizarre. But again, it's this very, very bizarre idea that in a first world country we should do this. Again, we still haven't got any new reservoirs built since, was it 1991?
In 1981, the Kielder Water in Northumberland was opened. That's the last substantial new reservoir built in this country. And this is the story. Rather than invest in new infrastructure, the water industry has just decided to try to use rationing to
while they don't mend the pipes. But
exactly, and about 20% of water is getting lost in the pipes.
I can see the argument of the but the bizarre thing, if I lived in the middle of the countryside and someone said, we're going to build a reservoir near you, but I mean, what's not to like?
Yeah, well, I mean, reservoirs do have these leisure purpose as well. They're very popular when they have been built. But yeah, going back to the supermarket analogy, can you imagine if Tesco or one of the other supermarkets was letting 20% of its food fall out the back of its lorries onto the motorway before it even reached the shops? I mean, that's what's going on.
Yeah, that's the territory. I mean, it is utterly mad. But, I mean, it looked like this is going to be approved in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it does look like it. Well, I mean, it's been going on for some time. I said this pilot scheme from South West Water was instigated last year, and I think Anglian Water, where I live, by the way, I think they're investigating a similar scheme. One thing I would say is that I think that every home should have a water meter. I think that there's still 40% of homes don't have a water meter, and there's no sort of incentive for those homeowners to actually save water or use water wisely.
Because they're not, I mean, I'm all for turn the tap off when you're cleaning your teeth. You don't need it. I pay the bills. I don't waste water. Most people I know don't waste water if they pay the bills. It's crazy. Can we also talk about electricity and gas? Because it's fascinating that water has taken over, actually, as one of the conversations about bills and rationing. But actually, electricity and gas is what most people care about, heating the light in their homes. But by all accounts, Andy Burnham is told he's minded to approve the substantial Jackdaw gas field in the North Sea after coming under pressure to basically boost our energy supplies. Officially, he doesn't approve it, though, does he? It will be the Energy Secretary, Miata Mambula, who has this sort of quasi-judicial role to approve that. And, of course, there's also an oil field as well. Do you think that is going to happen, given that Andy Burnham is also someone who, just a few years ago in 2019, when he was Mayor of Greater Manchester, during a question time event with the public, after 10 days of Extinction Rebellion protests, shutting down airports, Parliament, Bank of England and targeting public transport network and the like, had said that Extinction Rebellion did a great service in raising awareness of climate change and pushing the agenda. Are we sure this is a man who's going to make a sensible decision on the North Sea?
That was the time back in 2019, of course, when Extinction Rebellion had blocked Oxford Circus for 2 weeks, blocking all the bus routes, by the way. I mean, it wasn't open to road cars and so on, private cars. They were blocking public transport as well, stopping people getting about by public transport. So, they were a ridiculous way of protesting, and the idea that a sort of mayor of Manchester should have been supporting that was outrageous. But we know about our Andy. He's a bit of a chameleon, isn't he? And I think he has genuinely looking at the North Sea oil issue pragmatically rather than from an ideological point of view. And it's just such a no-brainer to allow this Jackdaw gas field in particular, and it's a gas field, and it feeds gas straight into the UK national grid. And those sort of Milibandites and so on, saying, it won't make any difference to prices paid by UK consumers because it'll just be sold on international markets. I'm sorry, no, this is gas going into the UK national grid. The idea that somebody's going to put it onto a ship and transport it to America to get a much lower price for it because wholesale prices are much lower there. I mean, it's completely ludicrous. This would be gas supply. Could be within months. It could be supplying 6% of our gas, which
is more than the wind provides a lot of the time. No, but also, by the way, why on earth does Norway bother? Why do they bother? Why does Saudi Arabia? They bother because it's in their national interest. Ross, there's so much more I want to talk to you about, including Zach Polanski was not very happy with the piece you wrote in the papers at the weekend. I've asked him to explain what you wrote was untrue and to show all his workings on a separate sheet of paper, but sadly, he has not done that, but I don't think he likes you any more than he likes me, which is a shame. Ross Clark, author of Not Zero, thank you for joining us. Claire Pissell, I mean, look, you live in the countryside. You live with the impact probably of the drought. I mean, we've lost a bit of our lawns. That has a massive impact on where you are in the countryside. What do you make of this? The water prices, the North Sea oil?
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous surge pricing. I can't choose a different supplier of water. I'm stuck with South East Water. It's a monopoly. If they were any good at the service, I wouldn't mind, but they're not, and that price is never going to go down, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I
what's
just
the point?
really resent being told what basic utilities I can use in a first world country in the 21st century. Absolutely extraordinary. And I imagine does Mr David Bull, who is in once again in Collins.
That's debatable, first world country.